Hey, guys, how we doing? I think we are golden. We are live. So, sorry for the delay, everyone. Had some technical difficulties. Needless to say, I don't think that we will be using Streamlabs for very much longer. Might be switching over to StreamYard. Frater RC has lent it over to us tonight. We're going to be streaming this to both On the Mysteries and to the Hermetic podcast channel. So you can catch us at both areas. And tonight, we are going to be talking to Frater RC. He interviewed me last week for his show, Hermetic Podcast. And tonight, I will be interviewing him. So he's going to be taking a lot more of the stage. We're going to talk about quite a few things, including John Dee and Enochian, some ceremonial magic, potentially some Celtic magic, since it is the Walpurgisnacht was last night, and we have, May Day today. So we're going to touch base on that, as well as wherever the wind takes us. So welcome aboard. Come on in, RC. Hey.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Of course, brother. Of course. It's good to have you. It's good to finish our conversation, even though we had, 3 hours the other night?
3 hours wasn't long enough.
Apparently not. But tonight we'll, again, be double streaming. We're going to catch up where we left off. I'm sure there's some stuff that we didn't touch on that we'll touch on again tonight. But tonight is about you. This is your stage. I already had my stage, so it's time for you to shine a little bit. Right off the bat, I do want to talk about Ininoia Con right at the beginning, and probably we'll pitch it at the end as well. So tell us about Ininoia Con. What's going to go on there? Who's involved? I know there's some really high profile, great names. Some of my favorites in the community, including Ike Baker, Sasha Scheitau, and others. So give us the spiel, man.
Yeah, the idea started when I was talking with Dr. Terry Burns on my podcast. She's the lady and scholar, professor emeritus who did John Dee's Monus Hieroglyphica. This is sort of the definitive edition of the Monus Hieroglyphica that she did, and she has a wonderful 50-hour YouTube video course taking you right through it so you can fully understand it from her perspective and given the history of scholarship behind it. So she and I talked, and we were talking and decided it would be great for her to come to town. And yeah, so that's where it began. Ininoia Con grew out of that conversation. We decided to give it a shot, and it had to go be online the first year due to a tragic death in my family. But now we're doing it for real in person. We have Dr. Justin Sledge, Dr. Sasha Chato, Dr. David Litwa, the gnosis and Gnostic expert and heresiologist. Who else? Ike Baker. David Rankine reached out and jumped on board at the last minute, which was exciting as well. And yeah, he's actually excited to. We're the whole goal of this is to try and do 2027 for Dee's 500th birthday in Prague at Kelly's Tower. And I've done lectures there for a few days in a row back in 2019. And I know the people there well, and the hotel owner there who the manager there, he's a nice American guy, so he's very friendly. And yeah, lots of potential for in-person communities. That's what I'm really all about, is trying, especially since COVID and everything that happened with the lockdown up here in Canada, 3 years of not being able to see your friends or family pretty much. It's like, okay, life's short, let's do in-person, let's focus on in-person events. And it takes more effort than ever, I find, to make those things happen. So it's worth doing. It's just worth doing. It's going to be easy here on out, probably the rest of our lives, to talk online. But what I think is at risk is in-person connections and friendships and events. And I can see that that's going to be a major problem, because I think the writing's on the wall in personal relationships since COVID. People don't really seem to want to do anything anymore. And partly I think that's due to, of course, just working to survive, which everyone feels a bit to different degrees. But yeah, I think something happened to us, and we need to heal, and the way to do that is to probably get together with people in person. Plus, you know, getting together in person is different from talking through a screen. Um,
Oh, definitely.
I liked a while back what and there's controversies in the esoteric communities and the culture. Of course, we have some big
No.
controversies, especially even there's still a lot of tension between in when it comes to the bridge between practitioners and academic scholars, especially and it used to be on the side of the academy. Now it's more on the side of practitioners, suspicious or reticent to engage with academics, even though the willingness is there. And so that just hasn't really, that's a communication problem. And I think we can
Hmm.
do a lot with a little effort to improve that situation, especially by having a conference that is designatedly intended for both edic and emic presentations. So this is a place where academics can put forward information that is of value scholarly wise to practitioners, so with that specific audience in mind. Like, here's what I do. I may be a materialist and not believe in any of this stuff, but you do, and so here, let me tell you some great things that I wouldn't tell to usually an academic conference that would be of more interest to practitioners. And then the next lecture can be someone talking about the 49th Enochian call or something. So that might be giving something away there. But and from a completely emic experiential practitioner perspective, and the crowd who might think this is all hooey, they're welcome to, right? It's a chance for even for skeptical academics or non-religious or materialist ones to get to engage with practitioners in terms of qualitative research. And here's primary source examples of what we actually think and believe, which if scholars are upset about the reticence from practitioner communities to engage with them about what they actually do and think, this is a great opportunity to do that. And I think in person is so essential to making that work. Now, the conference is online as well, and we're fusing those two things together in a very gentle way. Um, but again, the emphasis is to bring people together, because like Bill Maher said, even when you have people you disagree with about things, his great quote recently I heard him say was, um, "Everybody's a monster until you talk to them." And
Pretty much.
that's just
It's
that's just
easy.
great. That's a great line. Some people, of course, you realize they're monsters after you talk to them, but that's neither here nor there. That's life. So there you go. That's the spiel. There's other presenters. Ike Baker, of course, who's just put out two books basically in the last 2 years. Really fabulous books. I've been thumbing through his Etheric Magic from Llewellyn. That's
It's a
great.
great book.
Yeah, that's it. He really did find a little spot there that needed to be filled in a bit more in our traditions, in our practices, and yeah, fair play. That was quite insightful for him to take that approach. I mean, a nice and he did it in a way that is blending the techniques you would see commonly in therapeutic touch or healing or qigong
Hmm.
and other movement forms. Even eurythmy is similar to that, to some of his suggestions, and blending that in a way that can fuse with ritual and healing techniques, blending with ritual techniques. I think is very interesting. So yeah, who else
Hmm.
is on? I don't have the list of speakers in front of me. Chris Trenholm is a local man from BC who's going to do a presentation on the esoteric architecture of the buildings in Vancouver and Victoria, as well as some of the personages. A lot of the personages he could apparently go. This guy could go for 10 hours on the famous occult personages, not famous but interesting occult personages who have existed 100 years ago in Vancouver and Victoria, which I had no idea of. But one of the ideas of promoting the Pacific Northwest through this conference is to make us aware of the cool people who were milling about here. Obviously, everyone knows Frater, who's buried right near where I grew up, and I used to go to his graveyard quite a bit during college when I'd have 3-hour breaks, and I would invoke Thoth and do the rosary and talk to spirits. And so it's going to be great to hear about a wider variety of characters. Some women who were involved in tarot 100 years ago in this neck of the woods did some interesting things. Just a lot of, so that'll be great. What other presentations? There's just more. There's a few more, and yeah, very excited for everyone, and very flattered. Oh, Aaron Leach is coming here. Yeah, I was just talking to him a bunch today, and that's very exciting to bring Aaron Leach with Justin Sledge and Terry Burns, and that'll be a fun panel because they'll have their own perspectives on Enochian and John Dee, and that's just going to be, that'll be a hoot. That'll be worth the cost of admission itself. And it's not a cheap conference. It's also not the most expensive conference. It is basically the price of a concert ticket here in Canada now. Like, it's actually much cheaper. Like, it's half the price of going to see Nine Inch Nails this summer. And that's just a few hours of your time, a few hour show, you know. So it is what it is.
So what made you choose Ininoia Con for the title of the thing? What was the impetus? And hopefully that'll segue us into talking about Dee and Enochian.
Yeah, well, Ininoia Con. So that's what the Golden Dawn called it. So Enochian magic is the title for the version or brand of angelic magic that the Golden Dawn created, that Mathers specifically, but you know, with Westcott and Woodman, created for their order. That's why I have a friendly debate with Aaron Leach's point of view of referring to Golden Dawn as neo-Enochian magic, because of course, and I've said this a million times, and we'll get to talk about it. You know, he and I haven't talked about it because we're saving it for in person, right? It'll be fun. But like, that's what they called it. It wasn't called that until they called it. Like, if you created a form of magic and gave it a name, it would be a little weird if I started referring to it as neo, whatever you called it. Yeah. Right? And you'd be like, why are you calling it neo? It's like, because it's the new form of it. It's like, but I made up this whole thing. I'm the first form of it. So Enochian magic refers to traditionally, capital E Enochian refers to Golden Dawn Enochian magic. But of course, the term has become a generalized term for any variety of it, and that's fine. We all know that there's no confusion there, so that's all good. But in the Golden Dawn, what interestingly they used as the adjectival and other forms, Enochic or Enochia. So they would say they were studying Enochia. I was doing an Enochic ritual, you know, and you'll understand better the mysteries of the aethers if you look into Enochia further. So they wouldn't necessarily say Enochian, which is kind of interesting because it liberates again the term Enochian and allows it to be more applicable as a general catch-all term for everything associated with this celestial language from Dee and Kelly. Yeah, the conference originally we were doing with Arcane Research Society was HERMETIC Con, which is now the URL is now selling for like $5,000-$10,000 because someone thought that they could get me to pay that, but it's like, no, that conference was scheduled. We had Lon, Chick, and Tabby all booked to go back in California, down in California in 2020. So that was scheduled for summer 2020. Clearly, that was So that was so it's been a long wait. It's been a long wait. Like, I was working at the church down in Cali and working at the retreat center, and we had this beautiful spot to do this great conference, and all the presenters were confirmed, and COVID just kicked the ish out of that.
So for the listeners, for people who don't know, who is John Dee, and how does that influence where we're sitting today? I mean, I know that's a big question, but let's just tackle it and be leisurely with it. For yourself, what does John Dee mean for what we're doing today across the scales?
That's an interesting question. Maybe I'll take a different tack than usual. So if John Dee had studied the writings of Zosimos, who was an early 3rd century Alexandrian hermetist, and one of the most prominent one, probably, arguably. And if John Dee did study his writings in the Codex Marcionis, and this is something that recently Dr. Sledge on one of his videos said I believe he said that wasn't the case. So there's a debate there, really fun debate to be had there between Dr. Burns and Dr. Sledge on on the transmission of Zosimos and alchemy through D, whether that, but because if Burns's argument is that through D, that actually formed in the Monas Hieroglyphica the structure of alchemical transformation through the elements in the same order that the Golden Dawn then used intentionally, and that information was transmitted, sort of like Frances Yates argues in her famous book, The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, that Dee did transmit his view of these teachings from Zosimos around Europe, and then embed them in the Monas Hieroglyphica. So that's what Dr. Burns argues in her course and in her edition of the Monas itself. So if you look at it from that perspective, then Dee really did, at least spiritually, become the father of Rosicrucianism. And what is Rosicrucianism in that sense? It is the transmission of Alexandrian Hermetism into the Renaissance, and a direct transmission from then D into the to form the Golden Dawn order. That would be an interesting way of seeing D. So if I'm gonna be brazen now, does that mean that John Dee is the spiritual and magical father of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn? Sure. Let's say that.
And probably a lot more. Probably a lot more. I mean, at one point, his library is the biggest library in Europe. And so his transmission of information between periods, he's a nexus, historically speaking, for many of the texts that come down to us. You know, in his rabid use of, or his rabid need to collect those things, to bring them up to where he was in England, I think preserved quite a bit for us. So I think that it's even beyond what you're talking about for the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. How much more did he also preserve from other traditions outside of Hermetism?
Well, I mean, in what sense do you think he might have preserved things? Because, you know, a lot of his library was destroyed or stolen or sold at various points by relatives and stuff. You know, he didn't really leave behind all that much, right? His magical writings were lost and found in a false bottom trunk.
That's true.
Some of the ones that were known in his life were left immediately behind, like Arthur, his son Arthur D, of course, he trained, and Alla Lucis have done a beautiful little version of book. So that's just beautifully done. Yeah, Arthur D wrote this, and when he worked for the Tsar or the Emperor. Yeah. If anyone isn't aware of this text, it still hasn't sold out yet. It's a beautiful little book. Their deluxe editions are, oh my god, so gorgeous. But like, you know, $500 for a little book. It's an investment, I suppose. So yeah, John Dee what did he preserve? I think to ask what he preserved, you have to look at what he passed on, and what he passed on was his family all died, and you know, other than his journeys around Europe, whether you believe that he intentionally planted seeds of his teachings and ideas to form this Rosicrucian tradition that began in 1614 with the publication of the Fama Fraternitatis, right? You know, and they put the Monas Hieroglyphica on the Rosicrucian Manifesto, so there's no doubt they were influenced by his text. And if he had gone around Europe explaining how to understand it, like even once he wrote the Monas Hieroglyphica, he actually took it to Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, and explained it to her. They had private sessions where he walked her through everything that it was in it. And there's parts of it like where he's saying, "Oh, God forgive me, a gracious majesty, for placing these secrets here, and even though someone might discover them." And what he's talking about, and he's talking directly to Queen Elizabeth in the text when he says that, but it seems, because what he's actually describing in one point is how to correctly adjust the parabola for a cannonball so that it will actually hit another ship. So like there's mysteries like that embedded into the actual symbol of the Monas. If you do Dr. Burns's YouTube course on her YouTube channel, Dr. Terry Burns on YouTube, you'll come away from it saying, wow, I didn't think I would ever spend that many hours studying parabolas in my life. Yeah, but there you go.
Well, no, and you know, that's a good point. Not necessarily in what I mean by preserve is like what survives from his physical work, but the inspiration across Europe, his travels, who he talked to, the fact that he kind of brought a lot of those things, to a more popular sense, historically speaking. Sure, there was all kinds of different sects throughout Europe where people are talking about these things. It never ever really dies out, right? But it seems to me, just from my own cursory historical readings, so like reading Louv's book, Jason Louv's book on John Dee and the Empire of Angels, it seems to me he was a very inspirational, kind of popularizing some of this stuff again in his time. What's your take on that?
I don't know how much I mean, you could still get in trouble for a lot of this stuff. So he really had to go out of his way to conceal, I think, what some of the stuff he was doing was. I mean, he was constantly in danger of that, which is, they had to do this song and dance about, we're not summoning demons, we're summoning angels. So nothing, nothing could go wrong. Though they seem very well aware that the line between angels and demons is not quite as solid as dualists would like to imagine, right? So I think they were aware of that. So you always have to, when you're reading Dee, like in any form of scholarship, ask, to whom is he writing this, or to whom might he be aware that this will be shown? Then once you start asking yourself that question, you start to actually understand Dee a bit better. So that's something people should keep in mind when they're reading Dee. Like, who is this? Like, there's parts of his diary that are insane, and then you realize, oh, he's showing these sections to a papal nuncio in Prague, who, like, if things go badly, you can find yourself burned at the stake pretty quickly. Maybe not burned at the stake in that time. That was more during the Enlightenment, a couple hundred years later, like, or 100 years later, right? But Bruno actually came and met Dee, didn't he? Yeah, I think so. I'm a bit foggy on. The piece for people to read would be Glyn Perry and Woolley, the Woolley biography. So, what were you gonna say?
I'm just trying to clarify what I'm kind of talking about. It seems that that this stuff is always somewhat underground, especially anything before 1800. Let's just put a random arbitrary date somewhere in there. It's what I kind of see and feel when I read excerpts from that period is that there was interest, but as you said, it's veiled. As you said, it's occulted. They're talking about it behind the scenes, but in the upper echelons of society, salons, those sorts of things, people are talking. People are talking.
The School of
Night
is what they had in the Elizabethan. They had something called the School of Night, and that's where all the elite aristocrats of the British royals and stuff would gather to share secret knowledge and secret teachings. And a lot of famous people whose names you would know were a part of that. Of course, we just don't have records and details to know too much about what was going on.
No, it's all speculative. It's all speculative. What's really interesting is how we view him today, and how much clout he has today in this circle, in these worlds. Let's play a fun game. Where would you rank Dee as a level of importance for the modern occult?
Oh yeah, when you put it that way, he's fairly important. I mean, could you imagine imagine if the Golden Dawn never existed? Would we even have Wicca? Would we even have the neo-pagan revival? Probably, just in a much different and much smaller way. It's when you look at it like in those terms, Dee is very central. Like, you can't have Dee without Agrippa, but you could have modern day occulture with Dee, but with not Agrippa, because again, Agrippa is not even something that people really understand well today until Dr. Sledge sort of elucidated him, and at the same time turning most people off, because a lot of people thought Agrippa was all into the walking the line of light and dark, but he wasn't. He was
Yeah.
he publicly was saying, the true path is Christianity, and the truest form of that path is Hermetism, is Hermetic Christianity, which is crazy that he would have said that live at all. But as Sledge pointed out, he did, and people were sort of okay with that. So gives you a sense of the liberality of those times. They were relatively liberal compared to periods directly before and after.
Yeah, that's interesting. You could have you couldn't have D without Agrippa, but you could have the modern day with D without Agrippa.
Without Agrippa. Yeah, but would you?
And it's like
D would have still come along without Agrippa. D doesn't depend on Agrippa, but because Agrippa did exist, D was very much formed like him, as everyone who read the 3 books would have been. But Trithemia, if you just had Tritemius, then it would have gone Tritemius to D, and just without Agrippa's helpful 3 books of occult philosophy. And
D,
I wonder if D, like Agrippa, is really interesting because, again, as Sledge's great course, everyone go check out Sledge's great course on Agrippa on his YouTube. It's free, really worthwhile. So D, I've never thought about this before, but Agrippa was constantly saying how this path wasn't for him because he had been to war. He's probably killed some people. He's not capable of achieving the things that he's teaching about and has been learning about, right? That's not his. He's not going to ascend or become some, reach the final stage, which is unfortunate. I think if he understood Hermetism better, he would realize, if he understood Hermetism in the way we understand the Hermetica text today, with the release of the Hermetica 1 text by Dr. Litwa, which I just did the audiobook for, and it's out on Audible as of yesterday. So that's exciting. Go to Audible, get Hermetica 1. It'll change your life, I hope. And certainly would have changed, I think, Agrippa's life, because he would have realized that he does have access to gnosis and the higher consciousness of nous, right? But for Agrippa, he wasn't worthy, it seems. So D does seem to pick up where Agrippa left off with this sense of unworthiness, because D definitely tried to be worthy. D definitely lifestyle, him and his family, all the kids running around, like he really did put his money where his mouth was, it seems. Reverence and devotion, which is what the Hermetic texts are all about. I mean, they're a devotional and reverential pushback against Hellenistic intellectualism. So in some ways, D might have seen himself as being the Agrippa couldn't be. That's an interesting theory that just has emerged from this your line of questioning.
That is really interesting. It kind of we build, all of this is building on, we're all climbing the shoulders of giants, right? And so we see these little iterations, right? From one to the other. And it's like thinking about, like, do we get Levi? Do we get Levi? Do we get Papus? Do we get any of the French and German at that point as well? It's really interesting just to posit that, because there's so few links in the chain, historically speaking, that if you knock a few of those out, we're looking at a very different world, for us anyways, and maybe a very different world in general. I mean, just the impact of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, not only from a kind of backdoor occult sense, but there was a great impact in the war. There was a great impact by people who were influenced by that, moving forward. So, I mean, we could be looking at a very different world if you knock a few of those chains out of that link down the road. There were so few.
And what if D hadn't gotten a copy of the Codex Marcionis? What if he hadn't copied it? Or what if D hadn't gotten that but had kept the Summa Sacra Magica? D got a copy of the SSM, which was very hard for him to get. And this is the grimoire that Stephen Skinner just finally translated and published, to my surprise, because no one, who knew that he had been working? I didn't realize anyone was working on it. It's so big. But yeah, so D had that in his hands, but very briefly, and didn't really get to make a copy because it's so big, and had to sell it in exchange for like horses and carriages to make it home on a trip. But he did get the Codex Marcionis, which has Zosimos again, and I will leave it to the PhDs, because I have only lonely master's degrees. I'll leave it to them to debate what really happened. My Latin, they're the ones with better Latin, so like let them hash it out, and then we can swoop in to cherry pick the results. but I think it is a big breakthrough that D had the codex and the alchemical and spiritual alchemy of Zosimos at hand, and then a year later, after he copied that, like he must have stayed up 3 nights straight copying it, because he was only allowed to rent the manuscript for a few days. It's a very interesting story, actually. So you can imagine him just furiously in his tavern copying out this Greek manuscript, and he was the Greek scholar of his time. He was the guy, right? He introduced geometry to Western Europe, basically. Greek geometry from what's his name, and so he was a Greek scholar, and so the Codex Marcionis would have been a big deal for him. And a year later, we see him put out the Monas Hieroglyphica, which is a reimagining, you could say, of his earlier writing, the Propodiomata Aphoristica, the Propodiomata Aphoristica. It's a mouthful, yeah, which is an earlier nascent form of the Monas from some people's perspective. But the Monas then is so it's D's embedding all of this knowledge in these. He liked ciphers, he liked codes, right? He was one of the original masters of codes and ciphers, along with people like Tritemius, of course, as well. Even though he wasn't the original 007, unfortunately, we wish that was true. It's just not. But he did do some interesting legwork for the British Empire, for sure. And he did coin the term British Empire. It was his vision. Jason Louvre is correct about that he did envision this empire of angels and this apocalyptic reign of Britain, which you can't really deny that it kind of came to pass.
Right. That's
Like,
one of the more compelling parts of Louvre's book, is like, whoa, yeah, like what was he talking to, and and what information? Because as we can see, what he was saying did come to pass. I mean, it's not often you can have such a bold claim like that and then watch it in such a short time as well just balloon and come to pass. Because from the time of D to the time of the maximum point of the British Empire, that's a short time, historically speaking. So to be that accurate, and to be that accurate on such a bold claim is really remarkable. And where to take that? Where do we even go with that? Because there's a few
another thing I could say that's probably worth letting you know is, because this is something I've seen people question. People have recently, I see comments like, "Hey, don't you know that Kelly was a con man? Aren't you guys aware of this? Why are you speaking so highly of him?" And young occultists need to realize that Kelly has been actually looked down on, and as a again, a very sus character for hundreds of years. And it's actually only with tremendous amount of scholarly work in recent years, just in the last little while, really, that he's been redeemed as a more credible character than we suspected. So people who are like, "Oh no, he was this charlatan," it's like, no, that's the point of view of the last several hundred years. But now we actually do know more about Kelly, and we've done harder work on him, and not relied so much as on the writings that were literally written to disparage these guys, right? So when your main sources of information are books that were written as polemics to like prop up their author's status, and just crap on a popular British necromancer because it's trendy and an easy way to get some status and get some social credit. Now we've moved beyond that, right? We've got. I was at the Leipzig archive in 2019. That's where one Kelly alchemy manuscript is, and again, it's others have done all the work that have really shown us how much Kelly is a figure of interest. And he certainly wasn't trying to trick D, that's for sure, because he was constantly trying to get D to stop the Enochian work. He constantly wanted it to end, and eventually did managed to part ways with D once he had sort of gotten his fortune and status and his knighthood and all this money. There's this great scene in Prague when they had moved out to Kelly had finally gotten noble patronage for his alchemy work, and now they went from being broke, losing their patronage, and being like, on the edge of homelessness, perhaps, when Kelly got a patron, and they moved into a castle. And there's a great scene where they took all this money, just imagine like hundreds of thousands, maybe, of dollars. They put it all on a table, and they brought in one of the guys they owed a lot of money to, who had helped them survive the past few years. And they brought him in, and they're like, so gangster, right? They're like, there's this pile of money on the table, like, how do you like us now, right? Here's your change that we owe you. Have a nice day. Just to show them how well they were doing. It's such a gangster scene. It would be great if someone did a serious movie about any of the fragments of their life or their story in general one day. A movie is well done, based on one of the good biographies by Woolley or what's his name, Glenn Perry.
That's funny. And certainly it goes to show how pettiness is not a recent thing in occult circles, something that we've been experiencing in occult circles for quite some time. It reminds me of just Iamblichus's own petty retort to Porphyry, which is the entirety of On the Mysteries. Hey, by the way, I'm upset with how you talked to me, so I'm going to write a whole book about how you're wrong. Pettiness in the occult goes back quite a ways. So, yeah, let's. There's a lot we could talk about with D, but let's move on. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, you said we might talk about Celtic magic, but we should definitely talk a lot about that because it's one of our it's a common interest. But what were you going to say there?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with it. This being May Day, and that being something
happy
that many
Beltane, everybody.
Yeah, is it Beltane? Is it Belchana?
Happy
is
Beltane. Beltana? It depends how you spell it.
There's quite a few that I've heard pronounce, but a little bit of Celtic magic would be fun to talk about, and a little bit about you and your history with it. How did you get into the whole Celtic magic vein? I haven't really had anybody on the pod or the show here that has been into the whole Celtic current.
Yeah, early days for me, it was the beginning for me. So it happened like literally the day after my spiritual awakening occurred. I awoken spiritually to my higher consciousness, which is the term we use in Hermetica 1 that Dr. Litwa uses for nous. So nous sometimes refers to human cognition and reason. Sometimes it refers to higher consciousness. But up until Dr. Litwa's new translation and rearrangement of the text for initiation in Hermetica 1, up until then, everyone just translated it usually as mind. So you don't know actually what the text is saying if you're translating both occurrences as mind. So higher consciousness is not a bad translation for that. We actually struggle. I think often we shoot ourselves in the leg in our traditions with over specificity. Angels, demons, true will, HGA, higher self, divine genius, higher genius, holy diamond, right? Are we talking about higher consciousness? Yes. What is that higher consciousness? Then we get maybe a bit more into the weeds, but the Hermetists believe the higher consciousness was a daimon. So we are like the star gods because we have a daimon that is a deathless god. So we're deathless gods, and we're also dying gods because we're as gods in these bodies, and we can create in a way that no other human or creature or animal or spirit can create in the physical universe. Right? That's interesting. So I love that the text emphasizes what is divine about human beings, which is the fact that, like, look, there's no one else that we can see so far doing what we're able to do, any of the stuff that we can do. So we are dying gods in these bodies. And then when we die, we become like the star gods as united with our daimon if we have awakened to higher consciousness. So the day I experienced higher consciousness, I had already been meditating for years, doing transcendental meditation and Maharishi as a child growing up, because that was my grew up sort of Hindu, not Christian. So I grew up already with this in this Hindu-ish yogi cult. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, really, even though for us it wasn't really the best experience. Not due to the practices being problematic at all, but just due to the problem, human organization problems, which occur everywhere,
Yeah.
all the time, in everywhere. So that sort of thing. Someone in the comments here says the true Holy Spirit, higher consciousness is the true Holy Spirit. I like that idea. That's a friend from the. We were translating Pythagoras last night. In Dr. Litwa's Life of Pythagoras course. So Porphyries and this man, S. Mill, is a very cool fellow who I met in that translation class. And he's very cool. He's a chemist. So shout out to S. Mill there. Nice to see you, brother. Anyway, what was I saying? So yeah, I woke into higher consciousness while staring at this massive Canadian forest fire that was epic and legendary and has gone down in history. And the next day, I just felt like everything alive around me. I was like, again, it was like the Pentecost experience in Acts. That's the closest I can relate it to. I saw this fire on the mountain, and all of a sudden it was like there was a fire above me, and it was alive, and I could talk to it, and it was crazy. And I woke up the next day in a tent because this was summer vacation with my family, and I woke up the next day and something was in my head. I was like, what is this thing in my head? And it was like, you are meant to be an occultist. And I didn't even really know what that word meant. I was like, what is this? And I had to ask my mom what it meant. And she's like, well, actually, it's really funny you should say that. I don't know, because we're going to meet my friend Bill today, and we're going to go to his friend's bookstore, and he's a witch, and we're going to check out his witch bookstore. So we met up with my mom's friend Bill, who's a high-ranking Amorc person, and went to this witch's bookshop, and it was really awesome. We bought all these. Me and my sister bought all these little oils and potions and cute little things that 11 and 13-year-old kids would like. And there was a book called Celtic Magic by DJ Conway, and I asked my mom. I said, "What's Celtic mean?" And she's like, "Celtic, that's what you are." I'm like, "What? How come? Why is this the first time hearing of that?" And she's like, yeah, so I got that, and it was the first time I read a book cover to cover in one sitting on the drive back home from Penticton to Vancouver. So that was the beginning. Got home, I had a bunch of books I bought on Druidism, and this was when I also discovered that as long as I was buying books on occultism or spirituality, I had a kind of an open-ended tab, as much as a single mother could manage. It was like, oh, you actually want this was encouragement. Like, oh, this is something that you value and think I should be pursuing. It's not like, hey, can I have money to go play Street Fighter, at the arcade, right? It's like, yeah, sure, you can have $5. But if I wanted to get books on magic and druidry, it was like, yeah, I'll fully encourage you. So I went home and set up an altar and was like, oh, now what? And didn't know what to do after that, but that was the beginning.
Interesting. And you said you were how old?
This was like 13. This was 94, I believe, the year of the Penticton fires.
Wow. So it started early for you. And it's always interesting when I'm talking to people. It seems to be something of a big dichotomy between early awakening or later in life, right? After some stuff has gone down. That seems to be how most of us come into it. And I thank you for sharing that. It's so you get DJ Conway's book, you get a couple of books on druidry. What were the first few moves in practice like for you? Like,
well, that was where I was hitting a wall. I was hitting a major wall. Like, I didn't know what to do, because the idea of, to me, it seemed so trite and silly that the extent of my practice could be like tracing a circle, maybe with some salt or something, and then reciting a prayer,
right? That doesn't seem magic,
and
right?
there wasn't much to it, right? There wasn't much to those books as far as practice went, and I knew it felt like there was just something missing. And of course, like, I would, if I could have go back to my younger self, I would tell my younger self about emotion and passion and reverence and devotion and energy and excitement, and creating that sort of that. And I would tell myself it's to attract the spirits. You need to generate that kind of energy to attract the spirits. I think that's why dancing and singing are such powerful forms of invocation to call the spirits to us. And I just didn't know. So, but I did know meditation. I did know meditation very well because, initiated into yoga at age 7 and then again at age 10 into the adult tradition. I did know how to meditate and meditate very deeply. That was a no-brainer. Also, it didn't seem very magical or special to me because, I knew that Christians did this weird church thing and then they eat something, and seemed like very weird to me, very strange, of course, whereas all my parents did was sit down and meditate for an hour or two twice a day, and then they'd start bouncing and doing the levitation mantra and stuff, doing the yogic flying mantra. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, there's like the kundalinis, you're bringing it to the base of your spine and seeing how much you can elevate, bounce off the ground. And that just made a lot of sense. The way the kundalini flows, I studied kundalini and yogic, all that body stuff. Like I learned that at a very young age from reading my parents' books and practicing its stuff as best I could. I was very into crystal healing and therapeutic touch and anything like that. So yeah, meditating worked, and eventually that was sort of my inroad into understanding how magic actually functioned. Just going from meditation into astral travel, because in astral travel, that's when I started engaging with spirits that were very clearly distinct entities. And the astral travel experience I had were very radical because I was young. I had meditated my whole life. Obviously, my body was very clean and pure. I had never done anything. I never did drugs. I never tried pot till I was like 25. I was a big believer. You should wait till your brain fully develops, especially if you want to develop spiritual powers and cities. Growing up, my dad always told me about the cities that he knew, the 22
Mm-hmm.
cities of yoga in their tradition. And how funny was it that there's 22, like the paths of the tree of life, eh? Or
Mm-hmm.
the Hebrew
Oh,
letters.
it's so
And
weird.
he'd tell me about, yeah, so he would tell me about invisibility cities and strength cities and all these things. But TM just wasn't the path for me, especially since I watched him give it up as soon as he got divorced from my mom. He just stopped meditating and became a real piece of work, and that's putting it mildly, you know. Yeah. So eventually, I kept looking through the Wicca books that my mom had because she'd gotten some Wicca books, and they had a bit more of a regiment to them. Scott Cunningham, especially, had a very
Mm-hmm.
nice way of taking you step by step. It didn't really matter to me after I'd read like the first 100 books, and over that summer break, I just burned through reading stuff. Um, I realized that whether it was Wicca or Druidry, it didn't really matter as far as I was concerned. What the framework was around me sitting at my altar on a full moon and rising up to the moon didn't really matter. The paint job didn't really matter so much because there's the moon and
Mm-hmm.
there's me and there's consciousness, and what else do you need? Yeah. So I wasn't big into bells and whistles, which is why I was so uncomfortable with the Golden Dawn tradition when I first encountered
Oh
it.
yeah.
Now after my parents divorced, when I was 10, we had moved into an OTO oasis, um, a de facto OTO oasis run, and so I won't go into too many details about that, but like there was some books left mixed up with my own books as a 10-year-old, like Regardi's Tree of Life. So I had that, which got accidentally mixed up. I had a little book on occult personages, including Crowley. So I wrote a grade 8 book report on Crowley. And of course I was in Waldorf school. So yeah, I thought my teacher would be all shocked when I handed in this book report on Crowley and described all the crazy stuff he did, right? I thought I would get some nice shock value of my elderly British grade 8 teacher, but she just took one look and was like, "Oh, Alistair Crowley, that's nice." I was like, "What? How is that nice? Do you know anything about him?" She's like, "Of course. It's part of the whole Victorian occult Rudolf Steiner era. They knew more about him than I did." So yeah, at that point, I realized I could actually just talk to my school teachers about this stuff. And I started reading Rudolf Steiner. I read Rudolf Steiner's An Outline of Occult Science, which they've renamed now as An Outline of Esoteric Science, which says a lot. But back then, the copy we had at home was called An Outline of Occult Science. And I learned about stages of spiritual development, in the Western tradition that was very distinct from the Hindu yogic path that I was familiar with. That didn't, again, you have to really go far in that Maharishi tradition and pay a lot of money to do the advanced training. So I didn't know any of that stuff. There was no
Mm-hmm.
option for me to do that unless it was really something I wanted to do, and I would have to still meditate for another 10 years to be old enough to go into like teacher training or advanced city training, if I want to learn that stuff. And again, the cost is not little. Like, yeah, not small. And also I had problems with the fact that how they treated my mom when she tried to become a teacher, and they had a lot of opinions against gay people and stuff like that, and that rubbed me the wrong way at that time. It definitely did. So yeah.
So what was one of the pivotal, like, let's just talk about Druidry for a second. What was the Druid what was that influence like? How did that come into the mix? Because there's there's Celtic magic with Conway, and then there's all the other different variations. I mean, especially today we have, you know, Irish, which is going to be different than something Brythonic if you're trying to study something within Britain, or even some of the Gaulish, you know, elements are very different. And Druidry in itself is kind of like another faction. So when we're talking about Celtic magic, that's such a broad term that we've kind of dismantled in recent years, at least in the community. And there's so many different facets. Where were you most comfortable? Where did you find yourself fitting in the most?
Well, at the same time that all this happened with the awakening and all of that, every day at the beginning of class, you know, in Waldorf school, you recite verses or poems every day. You have a new one and you say it until basically it's all memorized, and then you move on to the next one. And one of the poems that we did at that same time was the Lake Isle of Innisfree, which of course I've never ceased to have in memory. I still have that and many other Yeats poems memorized. And reading more Yeats, that was my discovery of Yeats in grade 7. And so grade 8 I dove more and more into Yeats and started to see some hints of magical stuff. And then, like I said, I had a book of occult personages and did a book report on Aleister Crowley, or a biography. That was my big grade 8 paper, as a biography on Crowley, right? But that made me realize that Yeats was an occultist and a magician, and was trained in the same group that Crowley was trained in. And of course, you know, we were going to Banyan Books all the time and getting, you know, I could get quite a few books there. I was allowed to buy more magic books if we went to the occult bookstore than I was if we went to the game store and I wanted D&D books, right? So it's like, okay, I save up my allowance and buy D&D books, but then, you know, get the mommy money on the
Hey,
esoteric.
and they inform each other.
Oh, well, it was great because, you know, me and my mom could talk about it. We talked about this stuff all the time. We'd go out for dinner and we just talked for hours about what I was learning on Kabbalah or Druidry. But Yeats was definitely my way into Druidry deeply, so into his Celtic mysteries and into everything I could digest about that. And my family had come over from Ireland and from Scotland, so it was Irish and Scottish. It was the Gaelic traditions and the Irish language. I had already been learning the Irish language since I was 6 years old. So my mom got me these Irish language cassette tapes when I was 6 or 7, and I would listen to them and I would repeat the phrases. So I had some basic conversational phrases at a very young age in Irish, and I just decided to stay focused on that because I realized Scottish was a separate language, and they're completely different from the Brythonic branches of the Celtic language family. So I focused on the Irish gods. I tried to dip into the Welsh stuff, but again, it's different language based. And I realized, you know, if I want to be able to say prayers and do invocations in a Celtic language, you kind of got to pick one and learn it and see go from there. And which was really fortuitous because, you know, when John Michael Greer decided to dive deeper into that stuff, he went with the Welsh traditions, and I'm really glad so it was really fortuitous because, you know, had I gone with something like Welsh, then, you know, one way I would have been able to access all of his stuff, but in another way I wouldn't have had much to contribute because that sort of path he trod really well for all of us. For anyone who wants to dive into the Welsh understanding of modern Druidry, he's done amazing work on that.
It's true.
But there's been very little but work done on the Irish pantheon and the Irish traditions of magic. Recently, Sally and James North put out a history of Irish magic from Hollythorn Press. They'll be on my podcast this month, and that'll be fun to talk with them about that stuff. Yeah. So Yeats.
Greer was one of mine because I started much later in life, jumping into a lot of this, you know, late 20s, early 30s. And, you know, by then Greer's written so much in that vein. And so I think that one of the crossover points for me was his Celtic Order of the Golden Dawn, was blending those two together. And I was going, oh, well, that's my portal to exploring Golden Dawn material right there, because I was living in this OBOD world where I'm going through all of the triadic trainings in OBOD from the Bardic and then into the Ovate. And I was like, oh, okay, this is an easy way for me to kind of get an idea of what the Golden Dawn is like. And once I started messing around with that, it was like, oh, well, I'm definitely going to go and explore that. And so Greer was instrumental for me on the Druidry front. But going back for you, so you settled into
I will
the
say, I
Irish.
wish his books weren't out when I was doing it, so that was
Yeah,
unfortunate. There wasn't much for me except for sort of pseudo history books, and that's probably another reason why I moved pretty quickly into hermeticism, and modern magic and that sort of curriculum from the Druidry stuff, which we still practice at our coven. We had a high school coven, me and two other guys, and that was very Celtic, very Wicca Druidry stuff, not Hermetic. Weren't interested in the Hermetic stuff at all at that point. So the Greer stuff would have been a godsend for us because we could have had actual frameworks to practice, but no, we didn't have that. So a lot of it was very much intuitively. I put together all of our, Sabbath and full moon rituals just with guidance from my direct higher consciousness. That's how I did them. I wrote what I was told to write.
that's really how we should do a lot of it. I think I'm much more in line with that. We have reconstruction. We try to reconstruct based on extant texts and what we can find from the record that's left over. But with something like the Celtic tradition, so much of it has been dashed on the rocks that a lot of it is rebuilding from our own intuition. And I wish people had more courage to do that. One of the things I try to encourage people to do is to rely heavily on that. So much of the community is so dead set on, well, where's your source? And I'm with you there. I'm with you there, right? Let's rely on them when we have them, but it gets to a point where you've pinned yourself in a corner. You've got to have both. You got to have a little bit of both hands involved here. So it's nice to hear that that's how you started putting it together. More people should be more comfortable to do that.
Yeah, I was very systematic, and my high school graduating thesis and project was all Celtic mysteries, including developing a full system for working with each of the gods, the schemas, the colors, the god forms, invocations, all of that stuff. And but yeah, we don't have, the thing is, we don't really have any. There's 2 points of view on this. There's 2 ways to look at it, and one I learned as a Canadian, studying these foreign countries that I'd never been to, and that's the point of view that there's just not that much historical stuff. Like there's all these books on Om. Everyone has a million books on Om if they want them, right? The stone, the tree, the writing of the tree language, written on rocks and wood. But when you actually get the booklet, I've shown my students before, again, we see all the books that are available, but if you look there's this one little book I have that's very small, and that is actually all the information we actually have on Om. It's one little text. I think it costs like $60, and it's only got like 40. It's like this tiny. It's a tiny little booklet. I don't know where it should be, right around here on my shelf, but it's so small, and it's got all of it. It's got everything we know. And there's someone in this, I think they have the Om Academy, and they did their MA in Southern Ireland. This woman did, I believe she's a woman. Not sure of the pronouns. So I'll say that just in case, I'm sorry, I don't know how you identify, but this person been in touch, and they did their master's on Om, and so they're doing research and pushing forward the studies, but we just don't have much to work with. So there's one perspective, which is, look, the myths weren't written down until the Christian Middle Ages and written down by Christian monks who were intentionally trying to frame them in a way that perpetuated the Christian story, which makes sense, but isn't very helpful for understanding the history of pagan Celtic Ireland and surrounding countries. So there's that perspective that it's all lost. It's all gone. You have nothing. We have nothing really to work with at all. It's all completely modern. But then there's the perspective I actually got from living in Ireland, and the perspective of Irish people on Irish magic and druidry and all of that, when they do something, or teach me something, or tell me something, or teach me a ritual, or tell me a certain mythological mystery, and if I ask for a source, or if I say, how do you know that that's what makes that traditional Irish magic or whatever, they'll say quite clearly and quite loudly, because I'm fucking Irish and I said so and I'm doing it. Like it is Irish magic because they're doing it. And so there's the
Yep.
argument of dead archaeological record as tradition, and then there's the living tradition of the people of that land. And
Hmm.
those people are still in that land. They still have the same rock shrines and altars and mythologies, and they still promote it. I mean, they tried to have it beaten out of them for 500 to 800 years of strife and foreign intervention. But no, they held on to it. I mean, my great grandfather, my family, when they came over in 1915 to Vancouver from Dublin, and they grew up being beaten if they spoke Irish in school.
Hmm.
That was their world. So yeah, lots happened, and Yeats was a big part of that change too, right? He was one of the first senators of Ireland, promoted the Celtic Twilight and the Celtic Renaissance revival, the Celtic revival. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we the living tradition lives on, even though it has been colonized or conquered, right? It lives on underneath. You see that here in the United States, with the hoodoo tradition and the voodoo tradition, that literally gets taken from their homeland, transplanted here under the thumb and the yoke of slavery, and then maintains their traditions underneath the guise of Catholicism, and as best they can,
Yeah.
and it's a testament to the spirit, really, in my opinion. And the same thing happened with the Irish. I think there was so much of it destroyed, but today they still maintain a lot of it. It may not be exactly how it was, but nothing's permanent.
It
So
does it matter? That's the question. Does
no,
it matter? Like,
no, I mean, it would have evolved
can't the
anyways if it
Scottish,
was still.
Irish, Scottish, Welsh, Spanish, French, like all of these countries have Celtic history in them, because the Celts, like Constantinople, right across the strait, the narrow strait there was a city called in Galatia. There was the Galatians, and you have the epistle to the Galatians of the New Testament. Who were the Galatians? Well, they were Celts who intermarried with Phrygians,
Mhm.
and then they left there and went up to through Spain, France, Germany, Gaul, England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, all of that, right? And did they pick up what was practiced there from the people who were there before? Well, according to the Irish mythological epics, that would definitely be implied, but we will never know. Probably, I'm sure we'll never know, unless maybe the Akashic records help us out.
Yeah,
But again,
yeah.
that's sort of the whole idea of people from those lands today. If they want to be druids or practice druidry, then just the fact that they're doing it is the thing itself. They're doing it. It's real because they're the ones doing it, and they're
Yeah, and there's no guarantee that it would have stayed the same had it not been, beaten into a bloody pulp. Had it not been, beaten out of them, it would have changed. It would have evolved. So, yeah,
this
not
is a
much
good
history
point.
for Canada and natives.
Yeah, this is actually a good point that Clover Dallas, thanks for the comment, Clover, has made about history for Canada and natives. Like, yeah, so Canadians, like, I have one family member that came over on the Anne. So my mom's dad, his family came out. He was the last descendant of, or one of the last of the family member that came over on the Anne. They were loyalists. So there's one branch of my family that's an interesting. That's as old as Canada. That's, you can't have an older lineage to Canada than that coming over on the Anne. But as much as we don't have much of a national Canadian history, and as much as we wiped out the First Nations spirituality, this is something that's been made very clear to me with the First Nations elders who I've been in contact with growing up here, because we have a lot of that here. It was a big thing in my seminary. Even there was a whole First Nations studies department there toward that did that. Now the First Nations elders have always made it clear, like, yes, like their traditions got wiped out. There is no transmission in the
Yeah,
Pacific Northwest of the original First Nation spirituality. They'll say there is, they'll sell it, but there isn't. And but what they're the reason they make that point, this is, and again, this is not my point, this is what every single First Nations elder I've met has said this, has confirmed this and said this, and the people I know who, yeah, it is very sad. But the reason they emphasize that is so that you can realize, like, their tradition, it comes out of them organically, and just because the modern traditions are influenced by the Christian culture that was forced upon them, shouldn't they don't like it when you say, oh, that your traditions are gone and you're just rehashing Christian spirituality with your own nature spirituality and making up a new tradition. They don't like that, because that's what people are saying when they're saying it was wiped out. Yeah, right. And they're like, yeah, so we're doing what we want with Christian traditions and with what we have left of our own people's knowledge, and fuck off if you have a problem with that. Like, seriously, because it's so ridiculous to go to them. And that's like going to the Irish and saying, actually, Druidry and your whole history was wiped out, and all we know of it is what Christians made up. So you can't validly be whatever you want to be. Or you don't have a valid spirituality that's in any way connected to you.
Well, I mean, that goes to
that's
the
offensive.
obsession of
And
lineage.
You see it really clearly. Yeah, you see that really clearly, how messed up that way of interpreting things is when you bring it into the First Nations culture. Right? Because it's like, excuse me, they're not going to stop doing sweat lodges and doing all their ceremonies just because for a while they didn't get to for a few generations, and they don't really know how they did them then as a result. Right?
Yeah. I think that's a modern obsession with lineage and proving things and having an unbroken line.
Yeah, absolutely. Salvaging is a good word for it. It's like salvaging / recreating. I mean, that's all we do. I mean, hey, we're dying gods. We get to create even as we die. It's one of the that's what's godlike about us, is our ability to create, despite the short time we get to do it here in this physical realm.
Right. And the doctrines, the lineages, they all die. It's all of it dies out eventually and then gets transmitted into something else new. The last religion on earth hasn't been invented yet. We've got a long way to go with this. And the whole idea of purity in tradition is a mistake, in my opinion. Trying to get back to an origin that's pure in order for it to be valid is always a mistake. And it always leads to really crazy takes and really, really, really bad reasoning. So it's good to have these kind of conversations, I think, where we can loosen the reins a little bit and say, hey, let people practice how they need to practice. Because this isn't about your control over them. It's about their practice and how they need to orient themselves with the spirit. Because guess what? Spirit doesn't exactly always have the same constraints that we think we're supposed to have. It doesn't always work that way, So, anyways, so
I want to ask you about purity. The purity thing is interesting because it seems to actually be. Do you think it's not just in a culture, right? There's this crazy new rise in Puritanism coming from sections of our society that you wouldn't, in my opinion, expect it to come from.
Right.
I see it a lot coming from my people who it's hard to talk about these things because it's so these days it's so tense. But who do you see the emphasizing? Where do you see Puritanism reemerging, and where do you see this emphasis on purity and its importance being coming from? Because one of the biggest criticisms, people constantly message me and say that I need to, shut the fuck up and go away because I'm an impure person and therefore have no right to talk about anything spiritual or be even public in present society whatsoever.
Oh boy. Well,
Which it's like, when I hear that, it's just like, thank God I'm Christian, because honestly, my theology has an answer to that one. Thank you very much, you weirdo. Who are you to throw the first stone? Come on. But there's this weird thing going on, and purity is important in ritual work for preparing for an operation. But the idea that as soon as someone commits a sin, they should be exiled from society and preferably killed, is really coming back in a frightening way. And we see this a lot, right? Death threats against me and John Michael Greer, just for no reason whatsoever, as far as I can tell. It's just.
Yeah, well, I think anything that comes across that way that is othering someone because of how they're behaving differently comes from a place of fear. It's fear and insecurity, and they're using purity as a veil for that fear and insecurity. Something is a threat, right, to them, or they perceive it as a threat, right? More often than not, it's probably just the perception of the threat. That would be my take on it. But as far as your initial question, where the obsession with purity is, I think it comes from our obsession with proving things and having to be right. It's a psychological sickness of having the security of being right. I have to be right. If I can prove that I'm right, and I can prove to you through an unbroken chain of reason or, say, authority, that this is the proper way to execute whatever. It doesn't even have to be a cult. It could be anything. It could be anything from the esoteric world, from secular world. If I can prove to you that it is X, Y, and Z, then my argument wins. You are wrong. I am right. I'm secure, and I feel okay. I think that's where it's something in there. That's where I see it coming from. As it goes for purity in our circles, right, then that's another control mechanism, right? If you're not following the lineage that I hold to be true, then whatever you're saying is invalid or potentially dangerous to my worldview as well. And I think that's probably where most of that comes from.
Yeah, it's an interesting, it's because it's always fascinating me when people try and tell me what angels or demons or spirits or fairies really are, right? It's like, or when people ask me why I don't think they are what they think they are. And my answer is usually because, like, that's not what my religion believes or what my faith is. Like, our religion, especially in the Golden Dawn, which is not a religious organization, you can have whatever religion you want, unlike things
Yep.
like Thelema, that's a religion. Even though a lot of people are thelemic and another religion as well, which is always fun. I always love that sort of construction in a person's life, because I have that in my own life. You can call me a Christo-pagan if you want, but I love Jesus and lots of other gods as well. um, I don't have a problem with that, but yeah, people want to. What you're saying, I think, is right. Yeah, they want to know what the thing is, and they have a hard time when they discover that this thing could be different things to different people, because to them that's just insufficient, I guess. Is it coming from a place of, you think, is there an authoritarian, totalitarian aspect in it, and the desire for there to be singular interpretations? Like, is pluralism seems under threat these days from the very people who created it, if that makes sense.
I think that's a natural course in history. That is almost how it always happens. So it's you're right there. I think that there is some of that, but I also think that I think I'm going to go ahead and point the finger at scientific materialism or scientific positivism, the addiction to proving something and to proving it out, and having what we consider. Let's look at it as it is right now. That's a religion in and of itself at this point. Scientific positivism has become a religion. It is a belief system for a lot of people who don't actually understand the underpinnings of it, but they buy into what the latest spokesperson for science has said, and they buy it fully. It is an objective truth. There is no subjectivity anymore. It's objective for them. And I think it comes from a mixture of that, the collapse of religion as a major point in society in the Western world. When we don't have that anymore, and everything is run by the almighty dollar, and everything is run by science, then belief has to be something of a material, provable type for you to have any kind of validity, right? And so, do you see where I'm going with that? It's I think it stems from that line of thinking that if I can prove it, then I can. If it's material, if it's objective, then I win. There's no way that your subjectivity or your perspective matters, and it has, to a certain extent, damaged people's ability to see other people's perspective. Which is why I always say on the channel, when somebody comes at me with some snark, thanks for sharing your perspective. And I got into trouble with somebody last night who said it's not perspective, it's fact. Quoting the Bible as fact, not perspective.
That's
and I
always
thought
fun.
I was like, okay, thank you for sharing your perspective. And I said it again. He didn't like that. But
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah.
But there is something to that. I mean, it's our worldviews are senses of comfort, right? It's what our brain has done, our mind has done to provide a picture of reality, and there is comfort and security in that picture of reality. Now, if somebody else's perspective comes into my reality and shakes things up, there's an insecurity there. I have to rebuild that world now because you've just given me new information. What am I going to do with that? I'm either going to reject the information or I'm going to learn how to integrate it into what I already know. Most people, I feel, are not willing to take that secondary step. It is an immune response. And I think we talked about this the other night. We're kind of coming back to it. It is an immune response to, I don't want what you're presenting to me. It's like, nope, that's a virus. That's not compatible with what I have going on. So I don't want it. And the way to keep yourself safe in your own worldview is to have the belief that your beliefs come from a pure source, a pure origin that has been untainted. And then if you can point to somebody else's as broken or tainted or some other thing, then you have a one up on them. And it's really funny. The argument last night with the same gentleman sharing perspective, he said I'm probably misquoting him, so I hope I don't misquote here. But that's the really annoying thing about the Christian God. He's always the biggest, the most powerful, the oldest. So, you really can't do anything with it. And I'm like, okay. I don't, if that's what you believe, okay, thank you for sharing your perspective. But to that person, that is the end all be all. That is unbroken purity, lineage. That is authority. That is all those things that provide that kind of certainty, that level of certitude. And so, yeah,
it's like more power to you. What else can you say? Like, you do you.
I'm glad you found it. I'm glad you found
Yeah.
it. But, and I said,
sounds like you've awoken to higher consciousness.
Once you realize that that's your perspective and it doesn't apply to everyone else, you'll probably be a lot happier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Alain Badiou, one of my favorite philosophers, French guy, of course. I didn't need to say that. Alain Badiou, can you believe he's French? He talks about there's basically three kinds of evil in his view. He's an ethicist, largely. Well, he's many things, but I like his ethics. His book on the understanding of evil, and he would call that tyranny. That's the evil of tyranny, right? The idea that you should impose your ideology on someone else is just fundamentally evil. In his way of thinking, because how can because what makes us agentic as human beings is our freedom to define ourselves in terms of our own experience, to develop and determine our right relationship to the world, which is then our ethical stance to the world. But if you dominate someone else ideologically and enforce something upon them, they're no longer a free agent. So nothing they do can then be ethical. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They're not thinking far enough ahead. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's anytime you get into the one true thing, pick it. It doesn't even have to be religion. The one true anything is extremely dangerous rhetoric. It's extremely let's just take it in biological perspective from a biological perspective. If you dominate all genetics with one set of genetics, what's going to happen? If you have no diversity of genetic material, what's going to happen to your species?
Übermenschen.
Yeah, you're going to die. That's what's going to happen. And there will be no more use.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, even when I hear some very radically different points of view from my own, shall we say, like some certain conservative points of view, I usually it's interesting when I hear them promote the importance of racial diversity. They're like, and I've heard them conservatives criticize conservatives, saying like, no, you do not want just one thing. If you want us to be the best we can be, you want us to blend together in every possible way, and that's how genetics works, right? Like the strong, better genes carry on and improve it. So even if you do want to create better humans, diversity is our strength. It is our strength,
Just look at what happens to dogs when you overbreed them for genetic homogeny. Like that's what happens. And
so
like, do we all want to be bulldogs? Like,
yeah, those poor creatures.
Like that's a horrible standard of living. And so that's just one perspective with when we're talking about our bodies, our physical temples, right? Now, transpose that onto the mind and to people's belief sets. And you can understand how sometimes when you enforce a specific belief over an entire population of people, talking 2-3 billion people, that kind of worldview starts to shrink the genetic diversity of the ideas themselves. It's the same thing in the mind too. If we have no ability to think beyond a certain box, we risk running into trouble. And I think we have. I think the last 2,000 years have proved out that when you start to dominate all the other belief sets around you, you start to limit your options. And that can be very dangerous. And I think it has been overall.
Yeah. I think that's what we see with the great monotheisms of the West, which really are just two. Judaism is hanging on. It's doing okay, but it's tough time again. And people have a wide range of opinions on that, and I don't even really have one. But the interesting point is how Christianity and Islam flattened everything in the Western world, and that affected our development scientifically and philosophically and in every other way, right? Like we lost technology between the Roman period and the Middle Ages, right? We used to have all this technology, and I'm not talking about woo-woo stuff that some people think we
no, just regular everyday stuff,
just like toilets. Like, how is it that 2,000 years ago you could flush a toilet and it would go into the aqueducts or whatever? I don't know. But then, like, just 200 years ago, you had the royalty like using chamber pots in ballrooms and then spritzing themselves to cover up the scent, right? Like, how did it get that bad?
And then to think that, and for those people there to think that they were advanced.
Well, they threw out pagan science, all that dirty Roman pagan culture. Yeah. And thank you very much for this super chat, Jacobus.
Oh yeah.
This wasn't going to be on my stream at all, but we had trouble with StreamYard, so we switched to we had trouble with Streamlabs.
Streamlabs.
Don't want to give the wrong
shout
labs. Out.
The yard is okay.
The yard is
cool.
10-minute. The yard is working, and it is a very expensive software. So thank you for the donations. It allows me to keep doing this because I couldn't afford StreamYard otherwise. And eventually I will learn OBS, but it's a steep learning curve to be able to do stuff like this.
As you can see, because mine borked. It just borked.
Yeah, so. You know more about this streaming than us, and yet all of your knowledge and skill still led us back to
For nothing.
StreamYard tonight. So who knows why? And we couldn't figure out why. So thank you. Jacobus says, this is all eerily on topic for my current experiences in life. I do offer my thanks to each of you for the pleasant discourse. You're welcome. We'll try and keep it pleasant throughout.
I think we've been
I think we're
plenty
doing pretty
pleasant.
good. We're very good at it.
Yeah. But yeah,
got
I
the
think that is
Aquarius vibe going.
I think it's an important point
Aquarius,
that
we're sort of optimists, right? Yeah. What was the point we were making? Well, how traditions got, how Christianity basically wiped out everything else in the West.
Yeah, and I
was
think
a
that's
setback, and
there's an
we're
important
just
note to
starting
take
to
there.
heal from it now, I think.
Yeah, there's an important note to take from that, I think, and that is that even in our new traditions, those in our little circles need to be wary of stagnation and of clamoring or clinging to a certain idea of when was the best version of this thing, right? You got to allow for some levels of innovation, for evolution, and for change, because these things need to be living traditions, because when you stop growing, you die. That is what happens with all traditions. Any society, any culture that no longer accepts anything else, it dies. And that has been proven out, historically speaking. So, meeting of the airhead in the best way. That's great. Thanks, Kisa. Yeah, it's like you mentioned, RC, the Aquariuses we all gather here now, in this space.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Sledge, Dr. Puka, so I meet so many Aquarians in the occult scene that I'm like, oh, this is where you all are, because I don't meet you in regular life. I never meet someone and they tell me they're Aquarius. That never happens. In the occult scene, basically I could almost guess and be right maybe 25% of the time. So that's pretty groovy.
But I think you said something there, hope. I think I've found more hope as I age. I think younger me was much more pessimistic. As I age, though, hope seems to be growing on me.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't know why does hope grow as we age? Are we more desperate for it as we head towards the inevitable end? It's like, it's to my best advantage to be more hopeful.
I think for myself, and I'll only speak for myself, it is when I was young, I thought I could control everything. And so the pessimism grew from the resistance to the world not wanting to be controlled by me, or not being able to. Or I thought that if things just went this one way, things would be better. If they went my way, they'd all be better. And so when the world doesn't do that, and you're young, dumb, and full of what, it's the world is wrong. So pessimism is the mode of expression. But as you age, you realize impermanence, things are going to change. There's very little you have control over except for how you respond to certain situations. And there's a freeing element to that. At least there was for me, was knowing that all I have to really manage is me. That's all I got to do. And everybody else, if they did the same thing, that'd be great. That'd be really great. But I have hope if my dumbass can figure it out, then yours can.
Yeah. We definitely have to all learn to put on our own life jackets first, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do much for others if we're not taking care of ourselves. So that's something I had to learn, because I used to think that if you just give yourself fully to service, that everything will work out. Right? Because I don't know why I thought that. Probably, I was probably reading too much Christian, mystics like Teresa and John of the Cross and them. And you just, you're serving, but that's, or I confuse serving God with the world, right? Like you don't actually serve, it's not the world you need to serve, it's God, and God wants you to, have life and life abundant. I believe that. I believe that the glory of God is every creature fully alive, as Saint Irenaeus says. So find your abundance, find that fully alive life, that way of living in the world that's in harmony. I mean, this is where the Kabbalistic and Hermetic tradition is so fused together in a way that I really love, because the understanding of God in Kabbalah, well, there's many of them, so let's not actually pretend there's one, but like the idea of
The one
finding God
true.
through the balanced harmony uh of the face of beauty, the parts of theme of Tiferet, right? That's, you look at into the face of beauty and you behold God in perfect balance and harmony with God itself, and this raises your consciousness from Malchut back and places Malchut back into Ad, or lifts Tiferet to Dod. However, there's different points of view on that, of course. But yeah, but back to to the pre-Edenic tree. Essentially, you're raising Malkut back before the fall, to the pre-lapsarian state of utter cosmic harmony, and we do this through our raising our consciousness into our up to our nous, up to from our nous to our nous, our lower
From our
rational
anus to our
consciousness,
nous.
also commonly called nous, to our higher consciousness, also commonly called nous, just to keep things real simple for us.
It's got an uppercase N on that upper one, so that's how you know it's a bigger
That's the
one.
crazy part. It doesn't, and the Hermetic believes that the secret gnosis that you're meant to experience, not just hear about, is the gnosis of light and life, and that's a really optimistic and simple way of looking at things that I think really has a lot of value for us, whatever our tradition is, whether you're working with Irish gods or Scottish gods or Norse gods or Greek gods. Right, they're all faces of the higher consciousness, or spirits within the higher consciousness. They're all daimones or angels or gods, according to the Hermetica. And so, Hermetism was in many ways, looks to me like it was an early form of sort of interfaith panentheism, right? You could be a Christian, you could be a pagan, you could, and again, they didn't see much difference between being a priest of Thoth and also acknowledging Jesus as a Lord and Savior. They didn't see a problem with that, it seems.
Well, I think that was antiquity in general. People were more comfortable meeting other people and saying, "Oh yeah, we have that guy over here too. We call him this." They saw function and form as more important than the form that they gave it or that they interpreted it as, and they seemed much more comfortable with allowing that from each other. Now, behind closed doors, I'm sure there was like, yeah, but they're kind of stupid about that, right? But that's just human nature. But I think that I think they were more accepting than we are, certainly in the modern day. It certainly seems like it from the writings that come down to us.
And it's also easier when you're like, hey, so who is this God you believe in? And it's like, you tell them about your God, right? And then they're like, well, where is your God? Where is it? It's like, you point to a star. And they're like, oh, that's my God too. We just call it a different name, but you can actually point to it up there in the sky. That's who I'm talking about, that one. So that was something they had back then, which we wiped out with monotheism, with
I think
the Judeo-Christian tradition.
It's a little, so I'm big into the Orphic current and understanding a lot of that in late antiquity and the classical period before it. And they were kind of treading on a monotheistic transcendent version of Zeus anyways, as well, in the Greek culture there. Now, it was fringe elements of their culture. It wasn't the standardized approach to Zeus. But I think that's where you really lose it, is when you start to say that it's transcendent and you can't point to any material markers, the ability to speak about it and point to something and say, hey, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm talking about here. That steals a very poignant part of connection when you're talking to somebody from a different culture, right? Oh, he's the god of the mountain. You point to a mountain that is easy for us to understand what you're talking about. When you start talking about stuff that cannot be visualized, cannot be spoken about, when it's ineffable, then you start getting into territory where it's my word versus yours on what that is like. And that's also, again, dangerous territory to be in. And so I think that once you take that, when you take God out of the world, it creates serious problems for the human being. when you remove it and put it behind a curtain, it removes the ability to speak as they did in antiquity about their gods.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if you want to go in this direction today, but we've talked before about issues in modern culture, and my take is that whatever gods or spirits people are working with, if they have what some might call a theurgic goal of, whether you want to see it as becoming more than human because you unite with the nous or higher genius or whatever, but so let me try and see how I can articulate this. Yeah, the goals people have, the parameters and the telos, right, that they have when they're approaching their spiritual or magical work, that seems to matter a lot more than people realize, I think. And you've spoken about how people are taking gods and spirits and reducing them down to what they can get from them, right? And there's this that, because I would say there's nothing wrong with the henotheism or the pluralism and the complete almost subjectivism of this modern spiritual landscape, right? There's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, but maybe there is, when depending on how each person takes it, right? Like, are you following this as a path to higher consciousness, to more love and life and light to bring to the world? Like, because once you attain higher consciousness or experience, you keep experiencing it more and more, is the idea, of course, right? And increasingly entering deeper into the mysteries, as the language often phrases it, right? We keep going as far as we can, and then you sort of return back down, like hermesially, right? Extraterritorially, going from heaven back to earth, and then from earth down to Hades, and then back up to earth, and then back to, we're hermetic, we're bouncing around like Hermes. And but what's the goal of that? What's the goal? Is the goal so that you can live life, a more grace-filled life? That would be a Christian answer, right? And therefore be a blessing and bring more abundance and wholeness to others. Or is the goal to become so intimate with or is the goal to get stuff, right? And a lot of people argue that, well, with magic or with spirituality, at first, if your life is not going so great, then you should definitely use it to improve the quality of your life. And then you can worry about higher consciousness after that. Obviously, I think there's more of a double action that's needed in that. But what's your take on all of that, and what do you see going on? Because you said you liked our touching on the discussions of current state of a culture, so I'm throwing you a lead
so
there.
I why not have both, right? I think the natural course of attaining higher consciousness, of an theurgic anagogue of an ascent, you're automatically going to be in a state of petitioning sometimes. Along the path of theurgy is thaumaturgy. You are going to, even in the yogic path, right? As you attain certain states, you gain new power. You gain new CDs, you gain new access to abilities, right? And those abilities can be used to affect the material world. Now, the placement, in my opinion, of morality, of a moral judgment on the use of said abilities is silly. It's a modern thing, I think. So along the path, you're going to encounter these potentialities for an ability to present itself and for you to utilize it. So I don't think that it's an either or as much as it is a yes and. You're going to experience both. What you do with them will define your character. To say, from a Greek perspective, it's going to affect your virtue and your excellence, your arete or your virtue along the path. And that may have some effect on what your life is now, and also some effect on what your life is in the afterlife. But an interesting point is going back to what you said of why you're doing this. What is your why? Are you doing it for a joyous and better life now? Or are you trying to store up treasures in an afterlife, right? So that's another interesting how different cultures have handled the whole afterlife and this life question. If you're fixated on having better digs in the afterlife, the chances are, and what we've seen prove out in modern culture is you're kind of a dick in this one. So like, um, and so, yeah, what do we have here? We had a comment here. Christian tradition in its primitive years might not have been as exclusivist as it is eventually collected a reputation for being. And I think that's true. And another one that was good there, when you look at the hundreds of interpretations of first century Christianity by scholars, imagine if they were all true at the same time. Just to throw a bone to the comment section here. I think that afterlife and current life are a big piece of what you asked. And whether you're living for one or the other dictates a lot of your moral character in your behavior with people today. I would opt for living personally a better life now because I think that would eventually translate better into a better afterlife situation. But
So
even in the
how would you define a better life?
I mean, the simplest way is just don't be a dick. Like, don't.
It's a golden rule.
It is. Love is the name of the game, right? And people love differently, right? There's no one way to do it. So figure out what that is for you, how you deploy it, what it looks like, and also accept it. That's a struggle I personally have. How do you accept it? How do you bring it in when it's given to you instead of maintaining armor around that icy area of the Aquarius? You know, because we're all up here. This area is well guarded. But yeah, so living a better life is doing everything to the best of your abilities. One of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to that is the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. You know, watch your
let's
mouth.
talk about that because I hate that. Oh, let's
I
talk
love
about
that
it.
book.
Let's get into it.
I love that book.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think that
maybe you can tell. So yeah, go for it.
well,
Let's
I
see.
mean, I think for the modern person, it's incredibly short, so that's good because our attention span is that of a goldfish in the modern world. It's a pretty good entryway to a lot of different things that you're going to explore if you open up the door to exploring a lot of this. So I like that element of it, and I do like the agreements themselves. Watch your mouth. Always do your best, right? Oh God, what are the other ones? I'm drawing a blank right now. I'll pull them up. But they those living your life in those four ways really had a tremendous effect on me early on. And so,
Isn't one like don't assume what other people have agreed
yes,
to?
yes, don't assume to what they're thinking and or what they're going to do or how they're going to behave. And don't take anything personally, because more often than not, it's a lot about what they're about, right? So if somebody is on your case about something, it's probably got something more to do with them than it does with you.
Yeah.
And I think those are good rules to live by.
Yeah, it seems good. So here's if I didn't handle this very well, but and I apologize for that because you triggered me.
You're good.
But no, so the people I've met who have told me to read that book, it's because of the people who have told me to read it that I've never read it or been.
So you made an assumption.
Oh boy, did I! Because the people who were promoting these ideas, they were also the ones constantly betraying everyone and they would argue and they would use the Four Agreements just to justify it. They're like, oh, well, you assumed that I was gonna do what you thought I was gonna do. It's like, no, asshole, you said you were gonna do it, and then you changed your mind because I didn't force you to do it. And they're like, yeah, and the response is always the same. The response is, look, you need to accept the fact that we're all the heroes of our own story, and if you don't like the fact that I'm going to be the hero in my story and that you're just a side character who I'm, then that's on you. That's your problem. And that narcissistic shit I've ever heard in my life. That is so disgusting.
Oh,
Like those are
that's
people I
terrible.
don't want. Anyone who uses the phrase "everyone's the hero of their own story," it's like people who tell you that everybody lies. They're telling you that they're going to lie. Everyone lies and steals. They're telling you they're going to lie to you, and then they're going to steal. Everyone I've ever known who says to me, "Everyone lies and everyone steals," has always lied and stolen from me, without exception, until eventually I learned to see it coming. So it's like people who say everyone's the hero of their own story. It's like they're telling you that they are completely uncaring about anyone else, and all that matters is they're in it for themselves. So those two things have always coincided: the four agreements with everyone's the hero of their own story type people. I've never encountered things separate, and I'm open to it. It's just been a very odd coincidence. Yeah, I thought
I
you'd get
can
a kick out of that, eh?
I could see so this is people like to weaponize good things. I mean, they've weaponized just about everything that's good. So yeah, the four agreements in no point would it even cross the mental platform of Don Miguel Ruiz in writing that book that you could use the agreements against someone else. It's all an inside job in that book. It's all about how you react to other people, not how to control how other people react to you being a douchebag. Like that's not what the book is about. It's about how everyone is dreaming, right? Everyone has their own perspective, their own subjective look at things. And once you wake up from that dream, you realize that these four things are critical to how you can liberate yourself from the illusion of the world is mean to me, right? What is my job in this whole thing? It is to keep my word when I say something, right? So automatically the subject that you said right there was not impeccable with their word. So they could not be following the four agreements by not keeping their word to you the first time. So if they said, well, if they told you they were going to do something and then they turned the assumption game on you, they didn't understand what the book was about whatsoever.
Well, it's more
because they
that they
weren't
would
able to keep
use
their word.
They would use, and the one person who was really bad at this and did the most damage to me because of the four agreements, as he put it. I mean, and I'm glad we had this talk. Honestly, this has been great because I will read it now. I'm interested. You've actually made me interested to read it. So, he would use ambiguity as the weapon, right? So like, because we didn't have a contract about working together, and because I didn't, there's a lot of things when you're working with someone, especially musically, that are just assumed. For example, if I write and record a part on an instrument, you don't take my part and re-record it on your own and not tell me, so that you can tell people you recorded it.
Yeah, no, that would be
That
that would be living in non-integrity.
but because of the four agreements, he said that was my fault. It was all my fault. It's like, you've replaced me on my own project without even telling me. It's so evil. So especially when you're spending 6 hours a week for a year rehearsing this stuff with someone to help get the project off the ground, right? And they would do this to everyone, and everyone I met in the music scene had the same experience with this person. And yeah, I was like, yeah, well, don't you know that you're the hero of your own story? So suck it up, Buttercup. And they'd be like, oh boy, don't ever say that to me again. It's like, yeah, I know. So this person just goes through everybody saying the same stuff. So that was my experience of the four agreements, which is why I was so like hostile when you brought it up. But now I'm curious. I'll go read it. We'll talk about it at round 3 once I've actually read it.
Well, if that's you hostile, I think that we're in good graces here, because that's not what I would call hostile at all.
I could probably do better.
Yeah, where were we before the four agreements?
Well, here's a comment from one of your viewers.
I think we've all made some negative associations for similar reasons. It colors our perception. Yeah, I mean, they don't bring your baggage to the game. So one of the things that I thought is very poignant in say recovery, right? When you're in the game of recovery, people will bring the baggage of religious trauma to the concept of a higher power. And that's not fair to do in any relationship. Let's just take any relationship, even outside of recovery. If you're entering into a new relationship with somebody and you hear something they say and you allow yourself to be pulled into a previous thing that another person did to you based on that trauma, that is not level ground. You're not allowing that person to express themselves in the way that they need to express themselves. You're labeling them as someone else. So if somebody, if you said something that somebody hurt me with before and you assumed I was like that person, that's unfair. That's not nice to me. I didn't do that to you, right? But people do that to spirit. People do that to God all the time. Like, well, in my, growing up, I had this religious trauma. Well, I don't want to be with God now because of that thing that I experienced back then that somebody in the church did to me, right?
Yeah.
That's not approaching God or spirit on appropriate terms. You're starting a new relationship. You got to wash that slate clean. Negative associations do color your perception, and they will dominate your perception. They will not just color it. I think I would say I would go a step further than EG said. It will dominate you. And that's unfair to you and to whatever you're entering into a relationship with. And I think that goes with human beings, and that goes with spirits too. If you enter into negotiations with spirits and you have a preconceived notion of what that's going to be, you're severely limiting the experience that can come out of that.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons, like, I do like to talk about practice on the channel, on the show, but experience.
Can we spend the rest of the time talking about practice?
Sure. But also what your personal gnosis and experience is not always valuable and sometimes is dangerous for another practitioner. And I do like to say that, like, because if I read a book and I say, this person says, this is what you will see when you conjure this particular spirit. Well, now I've got a whole head full of ideas of what it's supposed to be. And that is limiting the experience that could be happening for me. And so I always, whenever if I'm reading through a book and then they get to a personal part of it where they're like, and this is what happened to me, I'll just skip right over it. Like, let me do it first. Then I'll go back and see what you said, because I don't need to color the experience. But yeah, practice. Go ahead. What do you take it away? What do you want to talk about there? What's a hot button thing for you right now?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I'll save my questions for you till I've answered that one. Hot button right now. Well, been really enjoying, since it was election season here in Canada, mastering the 30 airs and using Scott Michael Stenwick's method of doing using the airs for their original purpose, which was not what the Golden Dawn developed with traveling the aethers by traveling in the spirit vision, which Crowley then popularized in his Vision the Voice book, but rather the original intention from Dee and Kelly, as the system seemed to demonstrate the methods for influencing kings and rulers and political people of importance and help, affecting countries.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's it's an interesting form of magic, because for the ritual is very what's the word, prescribed. It's like any grimoire system. It's not flexible really, as to how you do it. There's in fact there's so much but there's ambiguity in that method, which is why Stenwick had to find a way to do it in the way he does it in his book, and I'll let people go find it. I won't spoil what that is, because it's quite a clever solution to an ambiguous problem. But the practice, so you go through, I like rigid rituals where you have a set form of going through it, because and that you do it the same way every time, and then you go launch yourself into the experience, right? And the experience can be very astral. It could be very evocatory. So like one of the angels that you're calling might do something phenomenological, or in the immediate space you're in. But one thing that, like, this way the space around you shifts when you enter a part of the earth is phenomenal. It's literally like, how you'd feel, you'd know it even if someone covered your ears and eyes and all your senses, or most of your senses, right? And teleported you from you're in right now to, like, somewhere else. You'd feel it. You'd know that where you are is in a different space. because you'd hear sounds, or like maybe you wouldn't hear anything, but the energy of bustling, of being in a busy place would be there. And so it's like that. You really do feel like you're in a different place. Like I did a lot of little air operations to in Palestine and the Gaza area, of course,
Interesting.
to try and help people find escape and be safe. Usually, I take a different approach to political magic than most people. Most people are like going for their guy or their team. I'm more like trying to promote virtues or help get spirits to help guide people to safety. And of course, I'll never know what that resulted in, really. But that's okay. It's not about that. It's about me uniting with my higher consciousness and calling all the daimons and the spirits invoked to do good, to help
Right.
human souls,
Well, and
whatever
I
their
think
journey is in this life or the next.
the most important part is that there's a delight in that, right? I think proving that it works is less important than the overall feeling that you get from it, right? I think that if you delight in doing that work, then that is the proof in the pudding, right? It goes back to the whole idea of verification and praxis. People have a big obsession with that.
It's
And
very
I
weird.
see
It didn't
why.
exist. It didn't exist when I was coming up in the early 90s and early 2000s. That was not a, it's like you just did the work and took note. This is why, this is why I like the occult scientist approach, because like you just do it, you do it a bunch and take notes, and then when you have this is also why the non-emanationist view that David Heimsmith is so prominent for promoting, and that I've always had, is so important. I think when you put really narrow parameters on yourself, like you're like, oh, I'm path working Tav or Kof or Shin, like one of these lower paths on the Hermetic tree of life that goes from Malkut to the astral triangle, right? People in an emanationist point of view will see them limit themselves as to what they can experience, but you should never limit yourself to what you can experience in any ritual. Like, and if you could, but if you do, you're probably not gonna, with a truly profound experience, if you're already going into it with a limitation in mind, saying, oh, I'm just traveling from Malchut up to Yesod, here's the spectrum of experiences I can have, and anything outside of that I should eschew, right? That's an emanationist fallout, I think, from the emanationist perspective. Just throw out that perspective, realize that the plenitude and the pleroma can be experienced at any time, anywhere, in any way. And all of a sudden, every time you do any sort of operation, prayer, meditation, anything, you could end up having an experience that radically transforms you entirely or in part, and thus leaves you in a better relationship to some aspect of yourself or the world and other people. And so being open to the fullness at any time, I think, is so important for how we approach ritual work. Yeah, so that's the answer to your question.
I
What's
agree.
exciting, it's keeping that approach in mind, and then it doesn't matter what operation I'm doing, because I can experience myself and the fullness at any time. Or again, you can have a very interesting interaction. Sometimes I do operations sometimes, like where it's like I'm expecting so little, but I'm open to whatever, because I'm open to the mystery of the experience. And next thing you know, I'm like going on this huge vision quest with this spirit who's like also calling my recently deceased sister, and we're talking in this vision quest, and like it's this whole thing, even though it only lasts the time like barely longer than a dream, right? So minutes, right? Sometimes those experiences, you think they last minutes and they actually are like 2 hours, but more, it can go either way. So being open, again, the openness to the other, the openness to the mystery, and you'll be surprised by what daimones or nous have for you.
I agree.
There's no little operations, there's no little rituals, there's no small practices, right? The simplest practices often are the greatest ones, and the
I
complicated
think
long
so.
rituals are useless unless you know how to experience even the smallest part of them in the fullness of what they can lead to. That would be what I'd say. Yeah.
I agree. I think that an appreciation for the smallness of things, for the things that seem mundane, that's the building blocks of the larger ritual. And until you master those pieces, then the larger ritual will never reach what it can possibly be for you. Right? It's the little day-to-day stuff that really makes up what your big shebang is going to be. So like master those first. And by master, I don't mean like get them perfect. It's doing your best every time. Right? One of the things I learned from yoga is, okay, I fell off today. I didn't get to my practice today. I just come back to it, and I gently guide myself back to it over and over and over again. That's mastery, is that you always come back. You always come back. Sometimes it may take you a couple days. Sometimes you might fall off for a couple of weeks, but you always come back. And that's the same thing with meditation. With that practice, for me, it is always back to center, gently guiding back to center, gently guiding back to center, over and over and over. That's the Zen training for me. That's the Zazen. Back to center. Okay, back to center. Okay, you went away again, back to center. And it's the same thing with magic or ritual devotional practice. Guide yourself gently through the process. Allow things to be how they need to be in that day. There is no such thing as perfection.
I had a girlfriend who practiced Zazen, and that was one of her main practices. But she thought when she found Golden Dawn stuff pretty hokey and goofy, especially like the Technicolor outfits and tools, of course, which of course really isn't Golden Dawn. That's Inner Order. Golden Dawn, white, red. Inner Order's rainbow colors, full rainbow, so full psychedelia. And though that division is important, and we've lost that division due to the development of the tradition, and hopefully we're getting back more to it a bit now, especially. Because I think, that's another rant for another time. But she didn't have much respect for the ritual work that I do. And so I was like, oh, well, I can totally get that. And let me explain what it's like for me. And after explaining it, and she was a sweetheart. She listened to me talk about it probably for several hours. And by the end, she was like, oh, so it really does sound, she said, just like moving Zazen. Like that's what you're fundamentally doing at the end of the day. I'm like, you're doing with Zazen. And then at the end of it, it's like, so we're that there's the fundamental practices are very similar, whether I'm moving around with wands and incense in geometric shapes and in certain circular motions, or someone's just staring at a point on the wall. You're still engaged in higher consciousness. And of course it's no mystery why a lot of Westerners like the ritual practices that move us around more and get us moving in our bodies more. I think there's a lot of cultural and climate reasons for that. Actually, I think like the parts of the world we are from, like I think it made some more sense in a hot climate where it's too hot to move around during long parts of the day, where you basically can't move around or you'll overheat. It makes more sense that you would develop a meditative practice that slows down the metabolism, because you wouldn't want to be like putting on 3 layers of robes and it's fumigating your apartment in 110-degree heat in India. I'm guessing.
Well, I could say that in the summer without AC, there are certain rituals I just won't do just because it's too hot. But there's always Skyclad, right? You can always do that in the safety of your own temple, right?
Or down on the beach. But we have a whole beach that you're only allowed to do Skyclad on.
Oh, well, there you go. Although, are you allowed to do the rituals there as well?
That's where we've done them. Yeah, bonfires from midnight till sunrise. It's not technically, you're not technically supposed to be there at night, but it's a special beach we have for the sort of the cops patrol it and make sure, like they'll actually patrol it while people are, so that everyone's like doing their thing safely. They patrol it, the nude beach, and make sure that if you're whatever psychedelics,
but everyone's behaving.
Safe. Yeah, it's actually really cool. It's a cool little secret we've had in Vancouver for forever. Wreck Beach. Google it. Wreck Beach. Pretty special place. And we'd go there, do bonfires every night, all summer long. There's bonfires on the beach all night long. You just have to be gone by 6 a.m. or you get a big ticket.
I'll have to check it out if I ever venture up to Vancouver.
Yeah.
So you said you had some questions. What
Yeah, I
was it
do.
that was cooling around in your mind?
Absolutely. So what of the Greek, you focused a lot on Greek gods and on Celtic gods. Was there what got you into Irish gods or Celtic gods, and what was the first god you really connected with, and what sort of rituals helped you connect with them? Yeah, but actually, can we take a quick minute pause before that? And I just got to run to the bathroom.
Absolutely.
Do you mind
We'll take
monologuing
a
for a minute?
small intermediate break here.
Do you mind
Yes, yeah, no,
monologuing without me? You can interact with the chat or something like that. I'll be 2 seconds.
no problem. So what do you guys have for us in the chat? Any questions? Anything you want us to cover in these final half hour or so what we have here on the live stream tonight? If you have anything we want to touch base on, let us know while RC is using the facilities. So far, the engagement has been great. Thank you guys for chiming in and sharing your bits and pieces. That really helps to keep the live streams lively. So I appreciate it. Looks like we've had quite a few people trickle in and out too, so that's good. Welcome back.
All right. Yeah, people always say they would like to hear more about talk about practice and experience, and I always am happy to talk about. You said you wanted to talk about that more too, and I think the reason I don't talk about it much on podcasts and streams is actually just because people don't get into it much, but
People are
also because
they
that's what I talk about in my classes with my students all week long. Like that's 90% of what we talk about isn't the theory. The theory doesn't take long to explain. Usually I can explain that to someone just in the write-up of the lesson. And then there's a demonstration of maybe a walkthrough audio or video of it. And then you need to do it a bunch, and then we talk about it, and then you do it a bunch again. And like that's what we spend a lot of our time is getting people right. A lot of people think learning magic is learning this technique, then that technique, then the next technique. No, that's not it, in my opinion. For that, you don't really need a teacher or a guide. You need a guide if you want to go deep, not broad. Breadth books and from podcasts and from everything. But depth requires guidance because you need someone who's gone deeper. So like when I first tried to get in paganism, I didn't know how to connect with the gods because I had no one to show me how to go beyond the superficial initial counter and maybe altar setup. And of course, as a young kid, I had no budget for this stuff. um, I eventually developed a budget because I got in on Magic the Gathering early on, had almost a dozen Black Lotuses and many sets of things, and sold a lot of that stuff to fund my magical adventure throughout my later teen and early adult years. But in the beginning, you couldn't afford like a beautiful statuette like I now have of the Morrigan right next to me here. I've got the Morrigan and I've got Bridget, who are like, my gentle goddess and my severe don't fuck with me goddess. And you're also a fan of the Morrigan. Now, so this is actually interesting. In my work on the Celtic Mysteries, I didn't attribute the Morrigan to the Tree of Life. I don't think there's much value in attributing gods to the spheres of the Tree of Life, but obviously because they correspond to planets, a whole bunch of them obviously do line up perfectly. That falls apart in the Celtic pantheons pretty much.
It really
But
does.
yet W.B. Yeats and MacGregor Mathers tried to do it anyway. I did my best to finish a bit of the work that they left unfinished. But in general, I didn't correspond the Morrigan to the tree. I was like, oh, she'd probably be more on the clipothic, like the clipa of Bina. If she's like the Klippa Bina, which isn't fair to her, really. That's reducing her to her most negative moment in her theogony, right? So theogonically, she's a much more, all these gods are much more diverse, of course, and you know that. So how do you connect with more? Maybe we can, what would be interesting is like I could learn something from you about how to work with Morrigan. I haven't yet done a formal operation with her ever. I've just decided to. I've not decided to work with her and create a spell song for her like I did with Bridget on Imbolc. So yeah, maybe you can take the role of teacher and guide into the mysteries of Morrigan here, and that would be a fun frame in which people could understand going deep with spirits or as God.
So, like I mentioned before in our chat last week, a lot of it is devotional for me. And so that's where it always starts. When you're beginning a new relationship with someone, it is courting. It is going to the altar setup. It is leaving offerings. It is offerings of time, offerings of sacrifice, offerings of recitation, right? For Morgan, a lot of it was transformational work. And that was why I believe that was why I was kind of guided to it, to work with her. I wanted to explore the Celtic vein because of ancestry. So there was some element of comfortability there. Then there was also just like an attraction to it, right? And so I wanted to get into that. After reading a few books, there was an obvious resonance. I was like, what is this? Why am I feeling this? Because that wasn't my initial instinct, was not to seek out the goddess of war and magic and transformation and all the many other titles that she holds. That wasn't what I was into it for, entering into this. It was more like, for me, I was like, well, probably get into this one dude god. I had like a whole poll to thinking that I wanted to work with the cauldron of plenty and Dada and all of these things, but it was the Morrigan that called first. And really what I understood that in later reflection was that I was going through a dramatic sense of transformation myself, coming out of addiction, trying to rebuild my life after destroying it. I needed somebody to whip my ass into shape, right? And that's one of the functions that she has, especially in the modern world. And so it was an interesting dynamic for me at first, but as far as practice, it was not only writing poetry, but also writing fiction. And actually, she became a character in the first book that I published, which was a fantasy. What was bridging Celtic, very Irish Celtic mythology with some Mesopotamian. It was really an exercise in the two parts of my consciousness and psyche, the being raised Christian and then now going into explore these pagan things and seeing how the world ended up the way that it was. How do we have these two things originally, right? And so part of the practice was exploring that, writing about it, and bringing some more awareness to her for other people. Other parts of it tied into my study of Druidry. So it was the memorization of triads. And man, I wish I remembered as many as I did back then. But or the memorization of certain Druidic statements. So it was that. Then it was just simple rituals, honoring the wheels of the year. Now, how much of that did they have in I know there's a lot of contention around that, that it being the wheel of the year being more of a Wicca construction. But I honored that. I started to tap into the natural cycles. And so the practice was also kind of, I would follow crows around the neighborhood, see where they were going to go. And what was funny was there was a group of them that were outside the tree when I was in the thick of it, really like working with her. They'd be out in this tree and they would call at certain parts of the day. Now, crows do this anyways, but for me in the experience, it was, okay, well, it's time to go explore. Well, they'd also drop a whole bunch of stuff right in front of the place that we were living in. So it's like, I collected those pieces as well. Those became offerings to the altar. I still have quite a few of those pieces that are just there for at the shrine. And so, practice was relegated to a lot of that. Devotion, understanding, learning, study. As far as magic, in that vein, at first I was not comfortable with trying to affect change with will in this journey. That was not something I was interested in doing, and to this day, I'm still not so great at it. I'm more of I think it comes from my background in studying Zen. Just accept what's here, man, and move on. Learn to accept what's here. You don't have to muscle your way through everything. And so a lot of my magical practice is governed by, okay, this occurrence happened. How do I react to it? That may seem like a very mundane approach, right? I don't always light up a candle to try and finagle my way into the better situation. More often than not, my training and devotion has led me to go, okay, this is what I'm supposed to experience. Sometimes that will actually lead me into, okay, you actually have to get your hands dirty. You have to say, and a lot of that practice was aligned with traditional craft. In witchcraft, it was learning all those bells and whistles, right? Oh, this so and so is taking a hostile stance with me. Well, I guess it's time to bust out a jar and some vinegar. Put their name in the jar. So they stop bad mouthing. But I rarely do something like that anymore. And it's so that's a lot of how she worked with me. I was the magical instrument being changed. Me, I wasn't trying to affect change in the world. It's always more rooted in me. If that answers your question, how am I going to use this ritual, this devotion, this honoring of a cycle to transform me into a more magical version of myself rather than the one run on autopilot? More conscious, if you will.
Well, that sounds exactly like you allowing the god to be a doorway or a chariot, a companion to help guide you deeper into the mysteries of your own higher consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that of course, the Hermetic view would unite you more with your holy daimon, your higher consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore all the other daimons that are in our bodies, which is great in the Hermetic view, because people, are magical powers coming from the magician, or is it spirits doing all the work 100%? Well, in the Hermetic view, the spirits are
Yes.
in you. All those daimons are in you, like making your blood flow and helping your joints repair and all of that, doing everything good and bad that exists, right? Like from the highest spirit daimons that help our brain develop and raise us to consciousness, to the lower daimons of our bowels and the kako daimons, who are very appropriately named for those lower processes of our bodily functions. Like there's all of that within us. So whether it's coming from you or the daimon is within you, I love it. It's sort of a moot point in Hermetic thought. So that's something people could take with them next time they encounter the debate of, do you have the magic powers, or is it spirits helping you? Who cares? It does sort of matter, of course, for certain schools of magic and certain disciplines of practice, of course. But yeah, I love your description of how, I love that you approach the god sort of through the narrative of a story of fiction, right? You gave the god form and in your own life through your own creativity. That's something I found as well is very important.
I think that was just my own way of relating to the experience I was having. There wasn't, I didn't have someone guiding me. So in the solitary, path, you've got to figure out a lot of this on your own, right? So that I think that describing that approach, and then what eventually happened was moving on to the Golden Dawn and all the gyrations and all of the moving around, dude. It was like, what are we doing here? And it did feel hokey at first. It did feel like goofy, and then you start to feel into it. And you're like, oh, okay. And that gave me so much more of an idea of what ritual can be. And gave a lot of form to some of the feelings and ideas that I had that developed early on with my forays into the Celtic world, right? And then I went back and I go, oh, well, that's a way that maybe I can do something that I did before in a more structured format. And so I feel really blessed to have both an intuitive sense of how to put something together myself, and then learning a more traditional methodology and a much more structured and rigid approach to things. I don't think everybody gets that in this world, right? A lot of us are one or the other, and having both has been a boon to me in my practice. Is okay, here's a structure, and that's how I usually start now. If there is something that I want to accomplish, I will pick my targets, pick my correspondences. What am I going to be working with here? Do I need something Venusian? Do I need something Martian? Do I need something? So dial myself in, give it a structure. And usually that structure will be, here is something that we all use, right? Whether it's the Etzchaim, the glyph itself, right? As a marker to start, and then break up the structure however you need to, and then fill in the gaps intuitively. That's how most of my praxis goes. It's theoretical, and it touches on a few of those pieces that we all use, whether it's 7 or 12 or 9 or 3. What are you going to work from geometrically? Fill in the gaps, and know what the kind of emotion is needed behind it, and then it's time to get weird with it. At that point, that's what one person said to me once when I was showing off something that I was doing. And this was years back. I got real weird with something I was working on. It was like a seal that I was just kind of working with and kind of coming to. Well, doing this one operation, I think it was a lot of Shem work that I was doing at the time, and the Shem have their specific celestial, like the Malachim language that are on a lot of the coins and those sorts of things. But I was like, I want to work with 3 at a time. And so I devised a seal to put them all into to produce a particular working with a specific psalm or something like that to affect a change in me. And I was writing it and drawing it out and making it really elaborate. And then I decided to show it to somebody in confidence. And he goes, I've never seen anything like that. Where did you come up with that? And I was like, I don't know, man. I just thought it was the way to do it. So I did it. And he goes, I remember his words. He goes, well, that's adeptship right there. And I would have never said that about myself. Like, especially at that time when I was just kind of muddling my way through. He goes, that's the mark of adepthood, when you've taken it to a weird place that isn't in a book somewhere else, and you're doing your own thing with it. And then he goes, well, what did it work? I'm like, yeah, I think so. I think it did work. And it later proves out that what I was doing was working. And so I was like, okay, so now I have some proof for it if I ever really need to pull the card on that. But I think that is something, and the reason I bring that up is, in practice, once you get to the stage of comfortability where you're willing to break some of the rules that you know already, right? What do they say in writing and any kind of art, any kind of creation? Know the rules before you break them. It's the same in magic. Know the rules, then get weird with it. And once you're comfortable to get weird with it, then you've arrived at some form of self that you can rely on. And that self is usually like what we've been talking about this whole time, is higher consciousness. There's those sorts of intuitive pieces that you get from working this path, those signals, if you will, synchronicities, whatever you want to label them as. Once you start to trust those, and then you can put them into action and they start to wield results, that's when you know that you've kind of arrived for yourself, right? I don't think it really always, again, is helpful to share all of that with everybody else in the world, because it may not work for them. What works for you may not work for me. But that's in a more solitary individual practice. In systems, right, like the Dawn, it always works. Like, if you do it, it's going to do something to you. It is going to work. It's proved out. Although we do have an interesting person in one of my communities who says the LBRP never worked for him.
Well, the LBRP should only be done when it's necessary. You should be doing the LIRP.
Mm-hmm.
You should be invoking. And a lot of people think, well, in the Golden Dawn, they believed there's writings where they talk about, damaging your aura, demagnetizing it if you're doing the LBRP every day without the LIRP to balance it out.
Yeah, without
really,
that counterbalance.
Yeah, so and like the LBRP is something good to do if you're feeling unbalanced. So if I'm feeling unbalanced before I do a working, I'll do the LBRP. If I'm already feeling balanced, I don't need to do an LBRP unless I'm in a new space that I've not cleansed or worked in before. Yeah, but they both versions of the ritual protect you. Why do you think he didn't experience anything from it? Because honestly, like usually I start people out. Most people, when they ask my advice on how they're doing that ritual or other rituals, usually I end up taking them back to the Kabbalistic cross, because even though in the original Golden Dawn they probably just didn't vibrate the Kabbalistic cross, they probably just said the words and crossed themselves, like Ata, Malkut, Vegadula, Vegabura. Either way, left, right, left, didn't matter. But now we do the whole visualization, vibration, rising up in as high as we can aspect of it, which really does make sense. If the original Golden Dawn didn't do that, they should have, because it fits perfectly with the whole ethos of the system and always invoking from the highest. Yeah, but so I do take people, if you're not experiencing any ritual, say with any pagan god working or anything like that, again, usually it goes back to the preparations. I find someone preparing themselves properly, purifying, consecrating themselves, and then going in with the right kind of focus. I think if you go in and expect the ritual to do it for you, that's the mistake. If you're expecting the ritual to work upon you,
For me, I think that's you can have a psychic block on it, right? If you don't believe that it's going to happen even subconsciously, then you're not going to become aware of any of the changes that are going to happen. And so I think there's bias potentially, and I've seen people with that. And then I think there's also misunderstanding of what it is and or what it is supposed to accomplish, right? But you raise a really good point. There's so much talk in people not in the tradition utilizing the pentagram ritual in general for, like, say, daily banishings, and like that is something that happens all across the world with people trying to do Golden Dawn material on their own. You see people saying, yeah, just do the banishing every day, and I was like, you don't have to. You don't have to, and you really should have
not a good
invocation
idea.
praxis.
I mean, either way, the ritual protects and purifies either way. But yeah, the main ritual, like when you look at the original document, it's an invocation. It's the lesser ritual, the pentagram, invoking form, and then the banishing form is a footnote, right? We've all seen the document from Yeats's uncle's diary. Yeah. Someone here in the chat
a lot of
says
misunderstanding
they do the LBRP
around that.
And yeah, someone here says they do the LBRP and it's mood stabilizing. Yeah, it's equilibrating. All of Golden Dawn magic is about equilibration. Like that's the secret to it, and that's where a lot of people misunderstand it actually at its very core, right? It's about being able, because when you invoke a force, you unbalance yourself, right? When you engage with any specific energy, it's like you're stepping forward, and we see this with the signs and the symbols, and that's another reason why. So I think Golden Dawn, they're not initiated into it. If you can make it work without initiation, more power to you. We're very proud of the system when it works for people who haven't had those pacts. Like there's a pact. You make a pact with the Lord of the universe and your own higher soul to not do certain and to do other things, and in exchange, the archangels and the spirits and all the spirits of the angel of the order makes these rituals work for you, because you've made vows to that angel and to that spirit in your own higher soul. So it makes sense that those things would really be powerful when you've made those vows and had those initiation symbols imprinted in your sphere of sensation. And it's not surprising that it might not work for everyone otherwise, but it definitely,
because you're just relying on you. You're just relying
exactly
on you and a
non-awakened, maybe you'll make
part
that
of your
contact. maybe you'll make it push through on your own and make a people do. I mean, that's what I train self-initiates and help get them through the system, and then I'm happy to bring them through the physical 5 = 6 initiation here in the vault in Vancouver, and we've got a couple we're building here. You know, we're providing a
Nice.
pathway for inner order initiation for self-initiates, because that's one thing that frustrates me about the plethora of self-initiation. Well, it's not a plethora, about there is self-initiation in the Golden Dawn tradition, which I see as it's Hermetic initiation, Hermetic gnosis of the Hermetic tradition, but you're doing it with that framework, right? So these are just your tools, your tool set, and your pantheon in which you're using to then access that, because we don't have access to the original frameworks of Hermetism from 3rd century Alexander. We don't have Osiris and the Egyptian Thoth priests to give us little techniques. We just don't, and we never will have that probably, right? But we do have other systems that have come along, like the GD. Yeah. So the symbols matter. Like the signs and symbols, they matter. The initiation into it can matter. But
I think it
yeah,
does. I mean,
definitely
because
it's yeah. Go ahead.
The being someone who's worked part of both, being in the neophyte grade, and then also flaming out, having that initiation, and then going through the solitary book, through the Cicero book, it feels different. Not having a group part, if you're doing this all by yourself, it's different. It just is. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just that it is going to be different. And I think that's a point that people need to understand when they're working on the material with their completely different rituals, right? You know, when you look at them, you have other people in the space with you. How would it not be different than if you're doing these things on your own and you're trying to be all of the different stations within the ritual setup? And so that,
yeah, I have a different. I don't take the same approach the Ciceros take. But
yeah,
that said, some of my students have had experiences using some of the Cicero's techniques that are more profound than any experiences I've ever seen some initiates have in a full-on temple.
yeah, and
So
you
again,
can have that
like
too.
we were saying about non-emanationism, yeah, you don't have to be an adept to experience the highest form of anything. That can happen anytime, anywhere, any place. Absolutely. So you want to keep that in mind. And I think you'll have more success if you do. Someone here did ask a question I should answer, I guess, because it's probably meant for me. Clover, you ask if there's any GD temples near Toronto. There was one run that was notoriously badly run by a former student of mine who's now like on the lam for the last many years. I didn't know. I didn't talk to him after 2003 because I left and shut down the temple in Vancouver back then. But then I recently, over the last few years, I heard of some stories like, oh wow, that guy really went. He really did create a cult around zinc and the whole. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on now in Toronto. They're not there. That group's not. Remnants of them might be. I think the Ciceros might have a group in or near Toronto. There's definitely one Golden Dawn group that's near Toronto that a friend of mine has mentioned. So there's some. I don't think there's too much that's that public. You really want to sort of figure out which order you're interested in, and then try and get to know people who are in it, and then eventually they might extend an invitation. Traditionally, of course, in the Golden Dawn, you were refused admission the first time you applied. So keep that in mind too. If someone says no, apply again. If you get if they tell you no, don't give up. Word to the wise.
You might also experience that in the initiation.
Well, I hear that some people like to play games with the initiations and do little tricks on people, and I'm not a fan of that. So I've against any of that, and I don't know what you might be referring to. I don't know, because I'm not actually sure who the group was you were with, but some groups I hear like to add in extra tests or pranks into the rituals, and I don't know what that's about. I don't get it. I've talked to adepts who've done that, and I've chewed them out, as friends, because like, hey, motherfucker, what the fuck are you doing? Like, come on, Jesus Christ, you know? And they're like, oh yeah, well, I guess it's, yeah, well, we don't, and then they downplay it. So it's like, I don't know what everyone's up to.
Yeah, I wouldn't have called it a prank. What I experienced as much as, are you really in? Do you really want to do this? You know.
Oh, that's
You
not a
know.
bad idea. Though honestly, it takes so much work to put on any initiation, even a neophyte one. It takes so many
Mm-hmm.
people. Like if
Yeah.
people aren't all living locally, you're talking about travel expenses. It's a big deal. So you really want someone to be sure. I even get quite upset when people join my thing, and I do all the work to get them going, and then like a month later, if they're like, oh, you know, flaky, it's like you have no
Yeah.
idea how much. There's no amount of money you could pay me that would have made this worthwhile for me. You're asking me to invest my time and higher consciousness into helping you
Mm-hmm.
and guiding you to something, and then you don't even do the work, you don't even fucking try, and then you give up and just think you'll try with another group who are just people I trained in the past, who I know for a fact aren't like doing offering anything better than what I have to offer. You're just flaky and you're looking up for
Yeah.
excuses, and I see people like this. I don't have any students like this right now. I have great students will come along, and the attrition rate is the same in my experience now as it was back in when we had 100+ person temple 20 years ago. The attrition rate's like, it stays the same. It's really interesting. And the experiences of people who are successfully doing the work and really focused on the work are the same experiences of people who are in full temples really doing the work. So yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. um, Trust yourself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've said before in the past, you may be hoodwinked going into your initiation, but after that, keep your eyes very wide open.
Yeah. That's the part, I don't think everybody understands. There could be a hood involved. Um.
Oh yeah, it's not like it's not like OTO where you're like totally naked, strip nude, or something like that. We Golden Dawn's a bit more prudish. We're not into that
A
kinky
little
stuff.
bit more.
Yeah, I like a little bit of prudishness in my magic because you know I don't need to be flopping around skyclad in a temple.
Well,
No one
it's
needs that. That doesn't help anything.
it's just ain't nobody got time for that.
Hazing, that's the word.
Um.
Yeah, I've had
So.
people warn me off initiations due to hazing, and I've said to people, I'm like, I've been through stuff in life. There's no way you will see me have a positive reaction if I sense even the slightest sketchiness going on, or if I think there's anything weird going on, which would definitely be the scent attached to any kind of hazing or
Right.
prankiness. And you do that with someone who's come from a rough background, who's survived by the skin of their teeth and lost everyone they love and been betrayed by a shocking number of so-called good spiritual people. You mess around
Mm.
with people like that, and I'm one of those people, you're in for a very bad experience and reaction from those people. You're in for a very bad reaction. So yeah, so to mess with people spiritually is very dangerous, I think, and people should really be
It's
careful.
not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
There's
it's
lots
a
of ways to
shame to
challenge
hear
people
that.
in initiations, and give them a heads up, right? Like if you're doing some Celtic ceremony at a Lunasa Games, in Northern Ireland or the Highlands of Scotland, and it's like, okay, so there's going to be a thing where there's sort of a challenge. It's like, yeah, that's to be expected. Then people aren't going to be traumatized by all of a sudden having some sort of challenge beset them. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's good. You want to try and be upfront, I think, with people. And then once you get more down the road and you know the group, then you can challenge yourselves in new ways. Then there's more
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. Like in the 5-6 initiation is notoriously challenging, and even extremely challenging depending on how some groups do it. Um, you know, like for me it was a 3-day experience. Um, with yeah, that was yeah, I mean, people have asked me to stop being so detailed about it so that I don't spoil it for others. But it's like, okay, yeah, yeah. But it's exactly what I wanted. All the challenges I was confronted with were ones I wanted. If I had a
Mm.
flimsy experience, an unchallenging, easy walk in the park, in my initiatory journey, I would have been very dissatisfied and probably would have immediately joined another group to go through it in a harder way. But fortunately, I had the shit kicked out of me by my experience, and it made me a very different, much better person, much more humble and
I
kind.
think that's usually that might just be an Aquarius thing. I look for it and I'm like, if it didn't do that to me, then did it work at all?
I mean, it's not like Saturn and Uranus are intense planets or anything.
Not at all. Oh man.
This has been such a blast, man. This has been such a blast. We could talk forever. Yeah. I wish there was any people like, I talk to so many great people on the podcast and on podcasting. I don't see there's not many people like this, like all of you who I meet online, where I live. It really is a shame that we don't have a big here. Yeah, it's too bad.
It seems we're all relegated to be at different points on the ley lines of the planet. We all have to be in certain. We can't all lump together. That would throw off the rotation of the Earth or something. But yeah, are there any last points you want to touch on before we kick it out for the night?
I'll have a million as soon as we end this. Of course.
Well, we can always do it again.
Of course. I'm sure we will. I really loved hearing your thoughts on Morrigan and stuff. Is there any do you have a favorite myth about Morrigan or any other god that you work with a lot? Do you have a favorite myth that means a lot to you, that it has been like a spiritual story that's helped you? I'm a big
I love the invasions in the Celtic, the battle.
The Book of Invasions is great.
Yeah, the Cathmage. That is one of my favorites. Her prophecy within the story and how things are going to go down in those battles are great. In fact, there is. Do we have it up here? I do. The Jim Fitzpatrick graphic novel of the Silver Arm and the Book of Conquests are really fun. I don't know if you've seen these.
Wow, no, I've never seen these. This is cool. So that's a graphic book based on the Liber Gabala, the Book of Invasions. Wow. Oh, where do you get that?
God, dude, I found them at a thrift store.
What? Those are gorgeous.
Isn't that awesome? Oh, yeah. Like, this is like super ecstatic Celtic art.
Yeah, grade 3, we spent weeks learning about the Red Branch Knights and the Finnafal and Finnmacool and all that. I just was obsessed.
So they have the secondary piece for it too.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh yeah, Lou Lafada, Lou of the Silver Arm, the long arm, the arm of the spear arm. I do have a Lou, a beautiful little Lou. I love that you can get the Celtic gods as little statues now. They haven't done them all up, but you can get them, and that wasn't possible when I was young. Not at all.
I think that that particular mythic cycle, and the writing's pretty good in them too. It's it's engaging, and I think that's the important part, because if you just go and read it, like I've got the Encyclopedia of Celtic Myth and Legend, and it's got a pretty decent translation of the battles. Other than that, in the Celtic vein of myth, the Battle of the Trees is one of my favorites. Are you familiar? You're familiar with that one, yeah?
Maybe.
It's
definitely tell our audience about it.
The trees are battling humankind in this battle, and they come into.
Is this an Irish myth?
Yes. It may not actually. I don't know if it's Irish. It could be Welsh. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
If it's Welsh, that would be explain why I don't know it. If it's Irish, well, I don't know all of them, of course. I'm sure there's some I haven't heard. Yeah, that's interesting. And thank you, Jacobus. I'm glad we could elate your spirits, my friend.
This is a great book if you're looking to explore the
Oh
Morrigan some
yeah,
more. Morpheus
this
Ravina's
is
book is really
great.
well
Yeah.
done.
Oh
This is a
wow,
really
yeah.
good one that goes
Can you
into
send
her
me a little?
different aspects. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah, I'll
yeah,
send you a
yeah,
link.
yeah. Facebook me the pictures or links or whatever. Yeah, beautiful. They're all gonna go on my Christmas list.
The Jim Fitzpatricks are out of print, so you'll have to find those in the
Ooh.
ether somewhere.
I love a
But
good
I can.
treasure hunt for books.
So for that, I think that is
Having to hunt
my
down books is
favorite.
not bad. It's a fun thing to do in life. Yeah. As far as like ways to spend your life, looking for a hard to find book is not a bad way to occupy your time.
What about you? What's one of your favorites from the Celtic?
Yeah, from the Celtic. Well, I have one of my treasures. This is somewhat Celtic. This, uh, this was a gift by a dear friend and former student. This is this is Yeats's autobiography about his time in the Golden Dawn, and it's
Beautiful.
by Kula Press, which was run by his daughter. And so some of the pages are still uncut in these, and he wrote 3 versions of his biography in the Golden Dawn, and this is the 3rd and fullest version. There's a critical edition with all 3 versions I have, which is also out of print, very hard to find. But I do love the Yeats Celtic stories. The stuff he did with Lady Gregory is great. As far as a really penultimate sort of recommendation for Celtic gods and myths, yeah, I should have maybe I have to think about that. I'm sure it'll come to me as soon as we're done. I mean, yeah.
There's so many. I mean, there are so many,
All
and
of the
so
Yeats stuff is my favorite because Yeats actually went around the countryside 100 years ago, gathering the stories from the old people, and before that generation just vanished into memory. And since then, of course, it's been even more reconstructionist. At least they had like these stories that they developed organically from living life. Like that's the stories he
mhm.
recorded, not the Christianized myth of the myths of the Middle Ages. But Yeats like just like, yeah, what and then what happened after the fairy stole your husband's shoes? And she's like, oh well, then he killed
That's
my son and then burned down our sheep farm. It's like, really? Yep. Okay. And then like they're just telling you what their stories are, and it's great. So the Yates stuff where he actually went and collected the stories with Lady Gregory did a good job of that as well. They really did improve on the situation that they had inherited from the Middle Ages. There's like the Middle Age stuff, and then there's basically Yeats. The plays, I would recommend his plays. You want to understand Yeats's true mystical magical thinking, it's in his plays.
I mean
I've performed
that's
in and directed lots of them. They're great. They're weird.
that's
They're
true
surrealistic.
of most magicians is if they have any poetry or any plays or any fiction that they wrote, their magic is intrinsically linked in those. Anything that they write that seems mundane, right, has a taste at the very least of what their magical elements are. Even you go back and look at the Greek stuff, and you can tell who was in and who was out when they're writing from a place standpoint and from poetry. There's a specific resonance that carries through in those works. So it's not surprising that Yeats is the same way. The only one I would say is Mr. Crowley should probably not have written poetry, just because it's just so terrible.
Some of it's like you could see that he was on his way to. Yeah, yeah. He needed it.
He just
It was
wanted
too
it
much.
so bad.
It was too much thesaurus. Too much thesaurus poetry. Like, yeah. Oh, here's a book. Here's one. Okay. Yeah, it's up here. Um. Yeah, this is actually one that people would probably benefit from if I can find it. Um, Yeah, I know.
We're getting
Oh, here.
Crowley poetry in the chat.
No, this is good. This is actually one that a lot of people don't know. Like, there's not actually, even academically, there's not a lot of top-notch stuff on pre-Christian Ireland, but this is one of them. And the author Dahi O'Hogan, his other books are good too. So this is The Sacred Isle,
Ooh,
belief,
okay.
belief and religion in pre-Christian Ireland. It's not huge. It doesn't have an index, because it was written a while ago. Yeah, it came out the same year I published my book on Yeats. So I had very little access to very few sources because just few existed, right? And they were all secondary sources. And even if I had paid the crazy fees to the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies for them to send me manuscript photocopies of the medieval texts, those are still not primary source documents. The Christianized
Right.
Book of Invasions and the Book of the Dun Cow and the Battle Raid at Cooley, those are not primary source texts. They are de facto, but not really. So this is good, and it's a beautiful. Yeah, this is done with a.
Okay, so now you have to send me a link to that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Sacred Isle, Belief
We'll
and
trade
Religion in
books.
Pre-Christian Ireland. Yeah. Like, for example, thus the Tuatha are described as employing it so that they can, this was a special skill of deities, the art of semblance, talking about the art of semblance, of looking like something. This was employed by the deities or other world community. Thus the Tuatha are described as employing it so they cannot be seen by mortals. The heroes of this world are rendered invisible through having it put around them by the community of the She, or can have the skill taught to them by that community. Its function resembled that of the Tarnkappa in the Germanic tradition, and there's every reason to consider it of some antiquity in general romantic lore. And then they talk about an old Irish legal text. So, like, this really does rediscover a lot of the stuff and parses it out from all the filler and sort of the New Age Celtic stuff, which I love, but let's be real, a lot of it's just invented on the spot. And that's fine. That's what we were talking about all this session or this whole podcast. What
It's
do you mean?
true.
It came direct from your higher consciousness? Oh, heresy.
Oh no, not
What's it
UPG.
what's it to do? Again, and we didn't get into UPG, but I have a problem with that term. Sometimes people convince me it's okay, but the gnosis is defined by its subjectivity. So the idea of having gnosis that's subjective leads people into this positivistic thinking that you were describing earlier, that there's a true gnosis. That's not the case. There isn't an underlying ontic gnosis. There isn't. All gnosis is subjective. Now, just because you see something and then confirm it's real doesn't make it less subjective. It just happened to be correct as well. Like,
Just
but
happened to be something that we can verify with a source that somebody
I
else
think it's
had a
very
similar
dangerous.
experience.
I think it's very dangerous to start ranking different kinds of gnosis in terms of what you'd call ordinal phenomenology, right? Just layering orders of personal experience and giving them a hierarchy. That's fine for ordinal phenomenology. I think it's very dangerous to do that with gnosis.
I agree.
Right.
It's also it's like I said before, even sharing what you have experienced in gnosis can be dangerous to someone else. Because it may prevent them from having the experience they need, because they're seeking to have your experience. That experience may not be for them. And I think that's one of the things that when we get into these communities online, we share those experiences with other people. If somebody has not done the same or requisite work to attain said experience, you give them that key, right? You're saying, here's what happened to me. That has colored their experience moving forward. And that could prevent them from having that experience. And then also, I do think that UPG is weaponized. I do think that people have weaponized it to belittle other people, and or as a defense mechanism for a tradition, right? I think a lot of times people will use it as a defense mechanism for people who are making wild claims about what they've seen in their own delusions, right? And then saying that is because this is what usually is what I see happen with the whole UPG argument. Somebody will come into a community and they're ranting about their particular delusion, saying that they have the one truth from that particular tradition, and they just got it through their own gnosis. And then they try to say that anything that somebody else has been following in that tradition is bunk. And so I think there is a little tit for tat with those two types of people. And so I think I don't know if it is useful. It is a useful way of silencing someone from being ridiculous. 9 aeons of UPG. We had somebody come in to the Discord server that I moderate and
can you explain that?
So they said that they had gotten all of this information, that they were just glossolia diarrhea all over the Discord. I said, well, where are you getting this from? What source are you getting this from? He said that was their response, dead on, from 9 aeons of UPG. And we were like, wait, what? And this was the, was it 270? You guys remember 271st Toth? So he's a part of a line of the Toths, and so he was the 270 something Toth. And so we have a button of UPG, and it is a little dismissive that we label things with. Is that UPG that you're telling us, or is that a source that you can point to as well that also goes with your experience? And so I get your point, though. I mean, it is weaponized a lot, and it is used to silence dissenters in certain traditions. And so I think it is dangerous. I think it is dangerous to say that there's an objective versus a subjective gnosis. That's 583rd. Sorry,
just because you learn something from a spirit daimon or higher consciousness or whatever, or discern it through auguration or divination, and it turns out to be accurate, right? Doesn't make it more or less gnosis than something that turns out to be inaccurate. I can why people would give it more credit. I do too. If I do a divination and it's like, oh, you should do this, and I do that, it doesn't work out so well, then it's like, yeah, that wasn't really I don't see that as a big win for me divinatorially, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like when you see a common response today. It's like when you tell someone what you think, they'll retort with, yeah, but that doesn't matter because it's just your opinion. It's like, well, exactly. I'm telling you what I think. It's like, how would it, of course, that's what this whole game is. And welcome to life. That's all we're all doing.
It's like that scene in Avengers Infinity War. It says, you're about to take the full force of a neutron star. It'll kill you. And he says, only if I die.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what killing you means.
Oh my God. Line. It's great. That's great.
That's what killing
I actually
you means.
did like those movies. I did.
I do too. I love them.
Yeah, people crap on them a lot these days, but they were good back in that era. The new era, not so much.
Well, they're gearing up, man. We got to give them time. Remember, there was a lot of time in between Iron Man and Endgame. There was a lot of time. We're talking about 15 years that they built that whole thing up. So it was, give them some time to do another series.
But they built them up with good movies.
The first couple were not so great. Thor 1, not so good.
Yeah, the Thor ones were, I think, I don't know.
Even the first stuff. Captain America wasn't so good.
I liked it. I thought it was really good.
I like it. I just said it's not of the same caliber as you get to Avengers or you get into some of the later in the series. They get really good.
I might disagree.
Well, I think that's your UPG showing.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking. Oh my
So I'm
God.
just going to dismiss your opinion here because I have verifiable points. Now, Santamata has a great point here. He says that Gregory Shaw made in his Hellenic Tantra, which is a fabulous book, by the way, similar to what we were talking about. The very nature of gnosis is it's meant for you subjectively. So that is a fantastic point. And if you haven't read that book, anybody who's still listening, or you too, RC, Shaw's book is fantastic.
I have the other one. I don't have that one yet, and I don't have time to read either of them until like the autumn. So, the next comment really elucidates Gregory Shaw's work quite clearly. So here's the next comment. Yeah, there we go.
Like Loki's show.
I love that we have discussions of late Platonic Gnosticism and MCU gods in the same interweaving. So good.
I mean, it's
you guys have been a great audience tonight. Everyone out there watching who's popped in, you really made this a fun night, and I was so excited to talk to Frater OD again because just wasn't enough time the first time. We're clearly two guys that if we had met in person the first at some event, PM, we would have talked till 4 a.m. that first night.
Definitely.
Right? We would have talked, maybe done some rituals, maybe jammed. I don't know. Are you a musician?
No and yes. I am attempting to be.
Yeah,
but
good.
I don't give
Everyone
myself
should
the
play
time.
music.
I went through a spell of buying a bunch of stringed instruments last year while I was working some Apollonian stuff, working through some Apollonian rituals, and I got the bug for music, and I have really just not made the time for it in the last couple of months. But between YouTube, work, life, writing, it's one of those things I need to make time for, just like I need to make time for ritual itself. But yeah,
and you've
so
got two little neophyte training.
Yes, they're more training me, but
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you want to learn, then teach, right? That's the thing, right? He's amazing.
They teach me every day how wrong I am.
Yeah.
So
how old are they?
4 and 2.
Good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff. You're in for a ride, aren't you? You're in for a ride. I'm very jealous. You've got a blessed life. Hey,
what is it that Hermes says?
Anymore.
What is it that Hermes says? One of the most magical things you can accomplish is to have a child. I believe that's in the Pomander. It's somewhere in there. That's how I read it.
The one thing that actually is worth mentioning as we wrap up, I suppose, is that the Hermetists also, like the way we experience sort of the divine. And again, I can't remember the exact phrasing of this, so any fellow Hermetica students in the chat might correct me. But it talks about we experience it through love, but specifically through erotic love. So they were kind of pro-natalist as well. They were a missionary and probably pro-natalist group because that it's sex and procreation, death. But what they mean, of course, by that is you have to be alive to die, right? So you of course you want to experience God through erotic love and create a new God, so that God, star God, can be born and unite with its daimon, because souls that don't unite with their daimon end up in a different place according to the Hermetica. And I don't know if that's really true. Well, I'll find out eventually, or not. That's the joy of it. Oh my God, another Marvel chat, another Marvel comment. They're not going to let us end the stream. They're never going to let us end the stream. It is the new mythology. And X-Men Last Stand and Avengers Age of Ultron left me more meh than the other pre-Infinity War. That's an opinion. Thank you for your perspective, S. Mill. This is a friend, Dr. Mill. Thank you, Dr. Mill, who's a real doctor, not one of us liberal arts crazy people. He's actually knows how things really actually do work. It's not UPG when it's a chemical compounds connecting and changing and exploding, right? It's like that's going to blow up. That's just your UPG. He's a real doctor, I think. Yeah.
Well, I mean, When you're a
and
medical
he's sharing his
doctor, we
thoughts
could
on
just
the
say
most
that you're
important thing
practicing.
of our age. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know he's not a physician. I think physicians shouldn't be get to call doctors unless they have a PhD in nutrition.
It's a good point.
I'm tired of
I
these
think
GPs, man. That like they're like, you know, they don't know how things work. How can you not understand nutrition and be a doctor of the human being? Like,
it's like being a mechanic but not understanding what oil is.
it's totally crazy.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what? It's been fun, man. We're over 3, and
What a hoot.
we would just keep going. But thank you for coming on my show, cross streaming again. We'll do it again.
That's
I'm
right.
sure.
We're live on. Yeah, and since I use StreamYard, I even put us up on my Twitch and on X, so we're on everything. People.
Oh boy,
we had a Twitch.
We're all over the place
last
tonight.
time, which is we're all over the place. You know, why not? It's who cares? It's all good. You know, and life's short, so you may as well make a little noise while you're here. Thanks everyone for the super chats to help pay for this overpriced streaming software. Though clearly it's not overpriced since it saved the day today. So you know the $150 it cost me a month. I appreciate help with paying for that, people. Tk you.
Yeah, I think I might make a little switch here in the next month too. So,
I mean, ideally, we both have like oodles of time to like master OBS, but we just don't. Like, I do hope to get up to that level. I do know how to solo stream on OBS, and I'm gonna start experimenting with that more and learn on the fly.
See, that's
but like for interviews,
my problem.
I can't have like, you know, Justin Sledge come on a live stream with me for an interview finally, and then like because I don't know OBS, it like conks out. That can't happen. So it's like, yeah, you got to pay for the stuff that's gonna work, and not crap out on you. So yeah, yeah, I will. we're working on it. We're using the tools we have. Thank you for all the support, everyone. Yeah, I know we're talking. This S Mill says we all have OBS. It's free. It's we all have OBS or IBS or one of the BSs. We all know a little BS. But it's about multi-streaming to multi-locations with guests and having like all these features where you can put people's things on. Be able to. It's doing all of it. Being able to do all of it. There's problems that occur. And if you watch people who are just learning OBS and doing streams, you'll see, if you pay attention, there's a plethora of things that can go wrong. You really got to know it inside and out to be able to do things like we just did today here. So yeah. So anyway, so again, thanks for the donations to pay for this expensive freaking software, but I really appreciate everybody. And yeah, you know,
and all
if we have to use it until
chats, guys.
It's so fun. Yeah, it's so great to be able to share people's comments. And you know, one podcast recently, I even brought someone in the audience into the screen. They actually like, you know, joined in as a caller. Like, nice. I'd like to do more sessions where it's like call in and people just like actually come on stream. I'd like to do that once a month where people can just like call in and whoever wants to be a guest or just talk for a while. That would be fun. That's getting more and more popular online. I've jumped into a few things like that online, and wow, it can be a surprise what some people will say to you.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
Oh my God, some people on the internet really take it to the next level.
Oh, I see. I like them in the comments section. It's where some of those belong.
Yeah, arm's length. You don't have to see their face. You just ignore them. Yeah, it's all fun. It's nice to have the interaction, especially after we had such a long lockdown up here. You know, we're still trying to rebuild human connectivity. So yeah, I guess we're done. We should say farewell. Let you go put your kids to bed. They're probably well asleep by now, eh? Yeah.
I would hope so.
Yeah, it's like midnight for you. Yeah. Well, how do you usually end your podcast? Because I'm technically your guest tonight.
Thank you guys for stopping by. Come back and watch another video. You guys are all my heroes. Thank you. It's usually very casual, man. There is no sign off. Thank you for joining us on the Mysteries, which I used to call this show Voces Mysticae, but I think we're just gonna
play an outro music theme. Here's your new theme music for your outro. account for your future shows.
Awesome. All right, brother. Thank you so much.
You know it's an Irish instrument when you could beat someone to death with it and then still play it. Like they're walking sticks. They're just for walking. They're just for walking with a wee big knob on the end that's got a bit of blood and brain left over in it, but that just happened by accident. You know, we would never hurt someone with these sticks. They're just for walking. My buddy makes shillelaghs if anyone needs one.
They are important to have
shipping from Canada. That's what they carry because they weren't allowed to have weapons. Yeah. Shillelaghs. All right, brother. What a treat. What a fun night. Thank you very much. And happy Beltane, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, the fires are lit. The fire on Terra. The fires of Ireland are burning bright. Though usually, actually, that's at the end of June they do that, not May 1st. That's a fun fact for people. Bonfire nights actually end of June, midsummer-ish. Yeah, I've played at many bonfire nights on the Aran Islands and all about. And only sometimes did people try to knife me.
All right, guys. Good night.
Good night. Be sure and stick around for to let the files upload.